Hi and welcome to Magic Numbers. This is episode 145, and it's that time of the year/magic season again, where me, Jason, and an assorted variety of people meet to discuss draft skeleton archetypes. This time we have a return guest, Zach Kagan. Hi, Zach. And a new person, although you heard about that person in literally every episode that I record because he is always in the acknowledgements. It's Jake Browne. He is not fake, as you have accused me. He is a real person. I was not lying. My girlfriend, though, that might be a myth.
Will
Thank
the
you for
real
having me
Jake
on
Browne
part of
please
the
stand up?
variety.
A part of the variety. In the good spirit of DEI, we need to have someone with a he him pronouns. So we cut Brian Condon because he is they them. We're just moving on with the new system and trimming whatever. Sorry, Jason, you're the only one. You're the only one left. Okay. I mean, as I said, this is probably the most chaotic version of my podcast, but it's good to have something that is not well organized and for a change, at least. In chaos, I mean, to be fair, there is a rationale behind it. Once the format is out and there is data, there's no need for chaos. Before you get any data and you wildly speculate, chaos is the kind of spirit from which new ideas are born. And we embrace
Always
that
chaos.
And we embrace that chaos. And hopefully you're going to attempt to make sense of what we're trying to do. Okay.
Chaos is better than data. You heard it here first.
I mean, chaos is sort of data. It's just like not really easy to find a pattern in it. Right. For those of you that don't know what draft skeletons are, well, it's a concept that's been around for a while. I mean, it must have been before, but I caught it from Sam Black, who was talking about building those kinds of basic versions of deck. And in Sam's version, it was 17 commons that you think are going to be important for a particular color pair. We honed on the composition of our skeletons, and currently, as they stand, to account for the change from draft boosters to play boosters, that's how it's called now. We have between 0 and 2 rares and mythics without duplicates, 0 to 8 uncommons, where we can have an occasional duplicate if we think that is very important. And the fill up rest with the commons and maximum 2 of each. So we try to build decks based on what we think that the design team wants us to do, or based on what we think is possible to make with these color combinations. That is not necessarily what the design team tells us to do. And everyone will have a different approach on how they build it, and we are going to try to rationalize our builds and explain why we picked certain cards, why we omitted certain cards, and so on and so on. In general, I think that building skeletons before the set is released is a very nice exercise. It prepares you to think about what you want to be doing. It prepares you to think about the plan rather than to focus on individual card power like you do in set reviews. You try to think a bit more synergistically about what's going on in the set. But before we go there, I usually start with the brief introduction of the damage-based removal statistics, because I heard that kids, especially the alpha generation, love it. They love percentages. They love hearing about sizing of creatures and how does removal align with them. So I thought I might release it on TikTok once I start TikTok.
Sure.
But you should be careful, though, because the language really matters, right? Because the youth is really plugged in. You know, they really like calling people kings and queens. So you should maybe to call it your like size queens chart.
Slay queen.
I think slay queens. Thank you very much, Jason. It's classic slay queens in terms of removal. They do slay. They are queens. There. And I have an 11-year-old, so I'm probably better versed in alpha language than any of you. So,
Okay, so which of these cards is bussin'?
all right. Okay, so starting.
The vehicles be bussin'.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
There you go.
Now Grim Bobble.
It gets it.
Grim Bobble will be bouncing and constructed, but I don't know how we'll do that in Unlimited.
Is it the Gyat? Okay.
Bouncing on that ball.
Realistically,
what?
there is a realistically one spell that deals with the 1 toughness creature in the set, and that's Locust Spray. There is a goblin that dies into pink something for 1, so that might be used on occasions. But Locust Spray kills roughly 22% of commons and 20% of uncommons, which is not terrible for this spell. And the good part of it is has cycling for 1, which makes it probably pretty useful in the deck to have. But I wouldn't waste a very high pick on it, so that's where I put the card.
Black isn't the cycling color pair, which is a little.
No, it's not. But I mean, 1 mana cycling is reasonable. 2 mana cycling is probably something that you want to be using sparingly, unless you have synergies that are linked to it.
If you think about it, you could think about this as it's castable 100% of the time, because sometimes when you cast it, you just draw a card.
Sure. Okay.
That's a very good way of putting it. Then we have the X2 hating spells, and Grim Bubble is one of them. The other one is an instant in red and uncommon Road Rage, I think. Mm-hmm. That can grow if you have mounts and vehicles, which makes it amazing. For 1 mana, you can deal 3/4 damage. That would be something. Grim Bubble is an artifact, and it gives something -2/-2 when it enters, and you can sacrifice it to Surveil 2. It kills half of the commons, which is relatively on par for compared to other sets. And 37% of uncommons to 1/4 of rares and mythics. Now, the problem with the Green Bubble is that the -2/-2 spells are much better when they are at instant speed, because then they can double down as combat tricks, and this one does not. And I think that it will be an overrated card, although it's going to be great in some archetypes that use artifact synergies. But if you're in a black combination that doesn't use artifact synergies, I think it will be slightly overrated for what it does. Anyway.
Question.
Yeah.
How are you counting for the Grim Bauble? Are you counting vehicles with 2 toughness? Because it
for the exactly, I am counting them for the 2 toughness, but they will be outside of your remit because you will rarely be able to kill them. And for the stats, I just counted everything that has a butt of 2, and I put vehicles in there because I thought there's too many of them to completely ignore them. But there's a bunch of the 3/2 vehicles that crew for 1 that you can't touch with the Grim Bubble, which limits its usefulness compared to the 1 mana spell that is an instant that can kill them.
I don't know. Sometimes artifacts or sometimes vehicles become creatures on your turn. Sometimes
if a 3/2 blocks, it's dead after the combat, and there is no point of casting the Green Bubble afterwards.
Oh, maybe you attack with a 1/4.
Baubles can be finishers too. I'm unreasonably high on this card. Great.
It's a kick. Your creature dies. Kicker, pay 1 black and waste a card from your hand. The other creature also dies. Is not a very good skill.
But to defend Bauble, there's that. There's an uncommon that's like the sacrifice and creature or artifact to destroy something or to exile it. What's that card from Foundations?
Bone Splinters.
It destroys. I'm pretty sure the one in the set.
So there's that, and there's also a common red creature that you sacrifice a creature or artifact to destroy an artifact.
So you can sacrifice your bubble to destroy their bubble.
Sure. I mean,
classic bubble off.
You're reaching bauble neutrality, but I think you prefer to destroy their vehicle, right? That's how you're getting the value.
There is going to be targets for that. There's going to be targets. I'm just saying that people are going to be super high on that, and I think that it's not saver. Let's not think about this card in the saver kind of framework.
Fair enough. Shots fired. I hear you. It's not a disfigure.
Then we have 3 toughness, and again, this set is weirdly standard. I think all the stats for X1s, X2s, X3s, and X4s are roughly basically in the middle of the last 12 sets in terms of the fraction of creatures it kills. So 74% creatures at common that can be killed by lightning strike. This is bog standard for the sets. It's not outstanding in either direction. 63 uncommons, that's quite a lot, actually, and around half of the rares. Also, lightning strike can go face, which is nice for start the engine, as it can increase your speed when really needed, and also finish the game when it's really needed, which is a neat feature to have on the removal spell. I mean, for me, lightning strike is going to be the premium removal of the set because I also think red is relatively strong. But generally,
sorry. Yep. Go ahead.
That's Go on.
If I can interrupt briefly, I will point out that one thing to note is that sometimes like looking at these numbers gives you a some amount of sense of like how good these removal spells are for like how often they can kill a creature. But it's also important to, and this is going to be something that's very hard to find out until like this has been out for a long time, which is how important are the creatures that each of these removal spells can kill. Like one of the biggest examples of this, which I think might repeat in this set, might also happen in this set, is like in Neon Dynasty, there were like a lot of artifacts and enchantments. And then so the green removal spell that like was a naturalize just ended up being good, even though it didn't necessarily, it only hit like, I don't know, probably less than 80% of things.
Definitely less. It was something around 50% in that case.
Yeah, like even though it was only 50%, it was very good because like the things that mattered were all artifacts and enchantments. So that's something.
However, I do think that Lightning Strike, the fact that it's 2 mana and it kills everything that threatens you early is always going to be important, independently of what exercising is. Everyone will play 2 drops and it kills basically, except for the 08, it kills all the 2 drops. And you know what?
0.3 Lightning Strikes at it.
Let it live.
There you go. That'll do it.
Okay, then we have the most useless stat. Yeah, then we have the most useless stat, the X-Force, because there is no removal that kills X-Force except for Rare. That is a sort of like a Wrath kind of mini sweeper that deals 4 to everything. So we don't have to focus on that.
You should just put the red uncommon there and assume you always have 2.
Oh, vehicles. And assume I have Mount and a vehicle. Yeah. It would kill 94% common creatures, which is
very good.
A lot. I mean, it's a decent number. Then we have the new trend that WotC tries to enforce, I think, is to make this more expensive red removal almost unconditional. And we see the Broadside Barrage that deals 5 damage, and that kills 96, 94, and 88% respectively of the commons, uncommons, and rares. So apart from very few cases, a bunch of them are like large mythic vehicles or something, it will deal with most of the stuff.
It'll kill the vehicle because it can destroy target vehicle.
I'm talking about Barrage now, not Crush and Burn. And then there's Crush and Burn, which kills 100% of everything. And then these stats are based on damage, but in fact, it would be slightly more if you include that some of the things that it cannot kill with damage are actually vehicles. And I do know that out of 7 things that it cannot kill at rare, 3 are vehicles. So you basically half it and will be roughly 95% of the stuff that it kills. Crush and Burn looks pretty good for that, an instant speed for 4 mana. This 4 mana is much better than 5.
08's starting to look like a really good stat line. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, the 08 survives a lot, yeah.
Yeah, if your opponent is like starting their engines and you have this 08, like you really do slow them down. Like
yeah, but you slow them down. That's my problem. I mean, how much better would that card be as a 1/7?
Okay, yeah, it would be better, but you know, how much better would French vanilla ice cream be than vanilla ice cream?
I have no idea.
Okay,
is there a difference?
I think it's like fancier. I don't know. It's not the best analogy that I've ever come up with.
It kind of looks dirty.
I live in UK. We don't. If you would name something French vanilla ice cream, people wouldn't buy it.
Oh, okay, sure.
They have.
It's just the vanilla ice cream that looks like there's little bits of dirt in it.
11 centuries of hatred of calling something French.
Circumvents remembers the Norman invasion.
Agincourt, we remember. I don't. I'm just saying people, the people of the Britain, they voted to be outside of Europe.
I love that Adam has the real answer, vanilla. Which is French vanilla has eggs in it. Thanks, Adam.
Oh. Okay. Or as
sounds
they call
like
it,
be getting more expensive.
L'œuf. All right, and we have some conditional removal, and actually outside of the shenanigans and tomfoolery here, these look actually much better than they used to. I checked the stats for the Broken Wings from the last set it was in which was Foundation, I think. Then it killed 36% of the rares and like 20% of uncommons and 15% of commons. And here we see 44% of commons, 51% of uncommons, and 41% of rares are killed by Broken Wings, which looks to me like a one-off in most decks, especially because vehicles are spread across each color. I think there's enough colorless artifacts that they will show up here and there. There is definitely several powerful bombs that are artifacts, and occasionally you kill like a large flyer or that is annoying, or maybe an enchantment of some sort. Gallant Strike that destroys target creature with toughness 4 or greater.
We found the way to kill the octopus.
Kills the octopus. Very, very important.
We got there.
Yeah.
Kills it twice. You can split the octopus in half and it still kills it. Kills 54% of rares, 37% uncommons, and 26% of commons. But it does have Cycling 2. And as I said, Cycling 2 is not exactly the same as Cycling 1. But you want to keep that spell for the later game. It will never kill anything early, unless it's an octopus. But if you keep it till late, you probably have enough mana to cycle it as well. And you can keep it as your emergency kill switch if the opponent plays something really large. So I think that this is also going to be easily one of playable. And last we have Sky Crash, which kills around 35, 41, and 39% of creatures that each are rarity. This is just a 2-mana destroy target artifact. It does have cycling for red. And I think that this card is going to be quite playable because of that. And definitely in blue-red if you're having at least some of the discard spell synergies. I personally see the red-white slightly differently than the red discard synergies. I see more like a tempo build that has a lot of bouncy spells. But I think that even in those versions, you will have some kind of discard synergies naturally because you want to have 1 and 2 drops, and these have often those abilities. So Sky Crash would play very well in those as well. So I think that all 3 of those conditional removal spells look pretty much playable, which is nice.
And main deckable, you mean?
Yeah, playable in the main deck in best of 1, the main form of playing draft nowadays, whether you like it or not. They are definitely good sideboard cards, but I think that these ones also in best of 1 will pull their weight. And then we have sweepers. There's 1 Wrath, and that's a spectacular pileup. Everything loses indestructible and then destroy all creatures and vehicles. And his cycling, I mean, you put it basically in every deck, I guess. Even if it's aggressive. I mean, you have cycling. You can use it.
That's a pretty good buyout.
Then we have Winter Cursed Rider. Blue-black for a 3/2 with ward, pay 2 life. Artifacts you control have ward, and it has exhaustibility 4, so 2 blue-black, and tap, exile X artifact cards from your graveyard. Each other non-artifact creature gets -X until end of turn. So I guess that this is like a super synergy card, and it can be amazing if you have a very synergistic deck with most of your creatures being artifacts, and you fill your graveyard with those, and then you give -3/-3 to all the stuff that your opponent has, and you're happy.
Yeah, certainly that one you'll see coming from a mile away.
You will, but what can you do? If they have a wide board, you have to play into the board, otherwise they will kill you anyway.
Well, then you just
could
deploy
remove
your
it,
bobble.
but not with
yeah,
not with the bobble, no. Oh wait, no, you can. Is it 3/2? I thought it was a 2/3.
Yeah. No. He's bobbleable.
He's bobbleable. Then we have Shepherd Archfiend, which also kills Winter, notably without having to use the ward. 7 mana for a 5/5 flyer, and when it enters, all other creatures get -2/-2 until end of turn, and has cycling. And I guess a sort of black-green reanimator kind of thing.
Yeah,
maybe
that's the joke.
But you don't want to
Reanimator,
hardcast it for
Reanimator.
7? For an effect you usually pay like 3 mana for? Slapped on a body?
Well, the body is a 5/5 flyer.
Yeah.
That's worth like 4 mana, I guess.
I mean, I played that stupid demon from Duskmourn, the one where you like discarded cards to like, minus something. It was not very good, but like you used it as a finisher in a pinch, right?
Yeah, because you had the Unholy Annex most of the time.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
look,
I suspect
if you had
mostly the-
Napoleonics,
I assume mostly the joke with the Archfiend is to cycle it and reanimate it,
Mhm.
like,
I mean, that's
and
a
not to like put
multi-level
it in
joke,
your
though.
normal black decks.
Wasn't there something in Amonkhet that was also giving -2/-2 and some when cycling something? Isn't that a
Yes.
play on some game on some
Sure.
previous card?
Like Golgari seems like it has plenty of access to lands, at least being able to fish them back out when
There's the
your various mills. So I don't think 7 mana is unreasonable.
No. I think it's perfectly doable. There is the ramp artifact for the ramp vehicle, the one that can tap for any mana as well. I think that will be played in those decks, I guess. But there's still reanimator that you can do it relatively early. So if you hit, and I guess Jason will be talking about those strategies. I saw that you had Shepherd Archfiend in your skeleton. I assume that it
kind of.
represents. I
Spoiler
assume it
alert.
represents a very different card, but it was there. I'm guessing it's something else, but whatever. Then we have Fuel the Flames. That's 3 mana for a deal 2 damage to each creature. It also has Cycling 2. I guess there will, if you know that you are in a deck that wants it, you will put it in, and I think every deck wants it. So yeah, there you go.
How much Convoke
I mean,
hate do they need to print?
I mean, it seems like just a like strong effect, right? Like you just like even in a deck where like you might have some X2s, as long as like not all of your creatures are X2s. Like sometimes it might just like do something nice, and when it doesn't, you just discard it. You just cycle it.
Yeah, you can have like
just
crewing creatures. You can not crew your vehicles, sweep the mounts of the opponent, and activate your vehicles, and you're golden.
This just seems very dangerous to me because I feel like there are a lot of cards that have been like, well, just cycle it. But this is an incredibly mana intensive set. Like outside of cycling, when you get into exhaust abilities, like I haven't run out of ways to spend mana in this format, and just being like, well, cycle it for 2. Like there's diminishing returns on that.
It's okay. I'll tap my Soul Ring to cycle it for 2.
Great, fair.
I'm just what I'm worried about this card is the constant fear I'll be living in with my aggro deck when I'm playing against a different aggro deck on Arena ladder, and I never know if my opponent is one of those people that plays an aggro deck and puts Fuel the Flames in it because they think, oh, I can always cycle it for 2 mana, and I'm pretty sure that I'm going to have some tilting moments when they will play Fuel the Flames in their aggro deck.
It'll be me specifically.
You will never play an aggro deck. Your deck will be
having
7 cards
you.
in graveyard before I even untap first time. Explosive Getaway, the last one, 5 mana for a sorcery. Exile up to 1 target artifact or creature. Return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. And this deals 4 damage to each creature. So save one of your things. Kill everything with toughness less than 4. And this seems like actually a decent top end in an aggro deck where you can save one of your things, and maybe you have the 4/5 on the board which doesn't die from it, and you can create a neat attack out of it. All right, that's the sweepers. Here are the cumulative stats for the given set. So as I said, roughly on par with X1s in this set, with things that die to 2 damage. Half is around what you would expect on average from the sets, with the range from 47 to 55%. With things that die to 3 damage, I think ranges between 65 and 80, and this one is 74, so maybe slightly on the higher part of it, but actually 65 was a pretty significant outlier. I would say that it's bang in the middle. And the only stats which is quite high is 94% of creatures are dying to 4 damage or more. And this is on the top end of things, because there's a bunch of sets where it was like 85%, 88, and this one is 94. It's lower than Foundations, it's lower than Bloomburrow, but apart from those sets, it's quite a lot. 94% creatures dying from a 4 damage spell. Right, let's talk about the big picture. So we have a lot of vehicles in this set, 41, spanning all colors, including 1 signpost for each color pair, and the crew costs are between 1 and 6. 6
What
seems
has
a lot.
crew 6? Is that like mythic or something?
I think it's a mythic. It's that
Yeah, it's-
white
Okay.
mythic.
Is that the
Boost the
610?
squad.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
it's the 610. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. 10 cards in set, including a cycle of 5 uncommon lands, create 1/1 pilot tokens. Good to know.
Are
Pilot
those
tokens
lands? Are
are
those lands
1/1s that can
identical
crew
with
3.
the color?
Yes,
Sorry.
every single color it's identical. That they're all ETB tapped unless you control a vehicle amount. Tap one in the color, sack it to make a 1/1 pilot.
And
they're
yeah,
like,
the pilots,
you know,
the pilots, yeah, but wait, just pilots are 1/1s that can crew as a 3/1 basically,
or
because
saddle.
they crew-
They added that
or
text. I don't know if
saddle, or saddle.
I don't know if they retroactively changed the Neon
They-
Dynasty tokens.
They
I assume
did,
not.
sadly.
They
Wait, they
pilot the
did?
force.
Really?
Oh, it's so bad. I hate erratas like that, but I guess it makes sense.
So you're
Um,
like bank buster?
I'm just
token?
confidently stating that. I have no idea.
Oh,
okay.
Okay.
But let's get Mike in the chat. Tell
Yeah,
us, Mike.
Where's my?
They did not. They did
not.
not.
Okay, great. Shout out. Anyway.
This is gonna happen like at the Pro Tour or something. Someone's gonna have a Reckoner bank buster. I guess not, because like it's the only.
No,
format
that's
in which
not
Bank
legal
Buster played.
anymore.
Modern All Star Reckoner Bank.
And I think that first of all, you would need to have to find a vehicle / mount in modern. which would be
Modern, no,
hard.
okay.
I don't
This
see
shows how
people
plugged
playing
in I am.
Bronco in Death Shadow.
But do these have
Anyways.
synergies with artifact matters?
What?
I'm sorry, I was just trying to segue to the next point.
Okay.
Bail.
Oh, I see. Like, wow, getting us on track. That no, we can't do that. One thing I will note about the pilot lands is that they seem okay. My assumption is that they will be worse than draw. Like making a pilot will be like on average worse than drawing a card on those lands, on that kind of land compared to like the spheres from All Be One or whatever.
Yeah, probably. But still, I mean, and I think that they would be not made equal. I think in like green-black, you don't care that much of having a pilot. You're probably much keener on having one extra land because you're mana hungry to the late game. While in white-red, you're super happy to sacrifice that land at some stage because you're sitting there with 3 artifacts. They killed all your creatures as they should, and
exactly.
And you have useless artifacts on the board. So you might start with the pilot and then start chomping on their life total with the vehicles. So it says
Speaking
synergy with
of-
artifact matters. They are artifacts, so they will be synergistic with the synergy with artifact matters. This is mainly in white, blue, and blue-black. Also, there are 13 mounts. Pro, they are always a creature. Con, crewing them is only at sorcery speed. But it's not really a con. I mean, it
Did you
is
say
maybe...
pilots are artifacts?
No,
they're just
the
creatures.
vehicles
They're
are
just-
artifacts.
Okay, yeah.
So there's
So-
a lot of vehicles, and of course, with lots of vehicles, I'm already looking forward to at the end of the season analyzing what is the right ratio of creatures to vehicles that allows you to win. And I will definitely dig into that topic because this is a question that's been asked time and time again. And finally, we're going to have enough data because it's a set that is sort of dedicated to vehicles, which you can make some proper judgments rather than when vehicles are in one archetype only, like it was in Kamigawa Neon Dynasty.
So one thing I want to say about vehicles is that, like in limited, there are often a lot of things that will ask you to have creatures, right? Equipment, combat tricks, like things that literally say, or like a soul salvage effect, like return 2 creatures from your graveyard to your hand, right? And with I normally advise people that creature count. Like people tell you to play a certain creature count, and like that's good and all, but like I don't think it actually matters all that much unless you have things that really care about creatures. But in a set with a lot of vehicles, that's basically always going to be the case. Like enough of the cards are vehicles that you will often just have vehicles in your deck, and so you'll have things that need creatures. So you really need to pay attention to the creature count. That said, some of the vehicles kind of either don't necessarily need a creature to function, or like provide their own creature. Like there's a white common 5/4 for 5 vehicle that makes a Thopter and it has crew 1, so it kind of crews itself. And I've been joking that card is a 5-mana 5/4 with when this dies create a 1/1 Thopter. Which you know, it's not bad, but it's not bad.
There's a bunch of them that have an exhaust cost that turns them into an artifact creature permanently, which is also a way of not having to crew them for the rest of the time.
Or a card like Hole Drifter here, right? Like crewing it is nice, but also like it has an ETB, so theoretically you could see like maybe you don't need to like always crew this, just as long as like because you do get an ETB out of it. So it
also it gets you cards that potentially are creatures that will be able to crew it. So it sort of semi solves its problem if you put enough creatures in the deck, obviously.
Yeah,
but you're basically right that
be very careful about your creature count when you're playing vehicles.
You're right in one aspect there. I did a lot of tests on that, and I never released anything because it was too boring and content has to be interesting for some reason. But I tested a lot of the times how many creatures you should have in your deck, and there's never like a good link between the number of creatures people put in their decks and the win rate. So
nice, vindicated in my advice to people to stop paying attention to creature count unless it matters.
There you go. And it matters in some decks. I think that in some versions of black-green deck in this format, it will matter because I really like the 4-mana Millipede, the one that mills 2 and then gets counters for creatures in your graveyard. I think that there it might matter because, the ooze. It's the Millipede. All right, start your engines. Trezio did a great job of putting still vehicles in the picture.
I was about to say, wait.
But we have the start your engines card here. I shamed Trezio publicly. There you go. There are 40 cards that can start your engines. That's a new mechanic. It basically, when you play a card with start your engine, you start the engine, and you have speed of 1. And then every time you deal damage to the opponent or they lose life, to be specific, once each turn you can increase your speed. So if you play a card with start your engines on your turn, then you attack, you deal 1 damage, your speed goes to 2. Next turn, you can again deal some damage or make them lose life, speed goes to 3. And then third turn, at best, you can get to the full speed at speed 4. And most of the cards that have start your engines will have a bonus for being at full speed. Some of them will have incremental increase, so they will have an effect depending on what speed you're going in. But most of the time, you only get the bonus when you get to max speed. But once you get to max speed, barring some very, very fringe exceptions,
one card.
I think that only the blue shell does it. You stay there, so you're good for the rest of the game, unless they have the blue shell, which is one card that can decrease the speed.
To answer Talvi in chat, the 4 cards that don't have max speed payoffs have effects that scale with your speed. There's a mythic Samet that says it doesn't have anything for like max speed, but it says like other creatures you control get +1/+0 for each of your speed. And like non-creature spells cost 1 less for each of your speed, or something like that. And
there's like some other random card that's like you gain life equal to your speed or something like that.
Yeah. So there's a couple of the exceptions there, but most of the things they just care about being at max speed, which means, well, you should build your decks in such a way that you get to the max speed. I guess that's the idea there.
Which is weird because you need to be both aggressive and you need a density of cards that say start your engines, because if you draw those late after doing a bunch of damage to your opponent, you're very sad.
Yeah, and also like you want to deal the damage and still benefit from being at full speed, which sometimes will not be the case, because if you're making an aggro deck and you care about killing your opponent, you shouldn't care about getting to max speed. You should care about killing them for dead, independently of how. And most of the time, you just don't have enough turns to benefit from the max speed, which is a bit counterintuitive to me, which makes me think that this format can be slightly slower than we might think, ironically.
Yeah, so one thing I want to say is that there's a certain sense sometimes of like formats where like attacking is really good and it's really hard to block, right? Like Almond Cat, right? It was a famous one that I never played, but I heard this was the case for it. But the thing about sets that reward, like that generally involves mechanics that reward attacking, right? Like exert is a mechanic that rewards attacking. It, like when you get to attack and exert, it like has an effect that's really nice for you. But when you have a set that rewards connecting, not reward one that doesn't like rather than attacking, generally it's more likely to be slower actually. And blocking is likely to be better because when you're blocking, not only are you preventing your opponent from damaging you, you're also preventing them from increasing max speed. Now, speed is also a bit weird in that it like you don't have to connect. Technically, it's just any form of life loss. So, for example, if on your turn your opponent activates the last ride, your speed will go up.
That's why it's on the slide.
Very often. Yeah, clearly. The best example of this is the black-red uncommon. It's a black-red for a 2/3 lizard something with ETB, deal 1 damage to your opponent, you gain 1 life, and it also has start your engines. So if on turn 2 you haven't started your engines yet, which probably you haven't, you play that card as a state-based action, I think. You will set your speed to 1, and then the trigger will go on the stack. And then after the trigger resolves, your speed will now be immediately 2 without having to attack your opponent. So there are ways to increase your speed. Right? No,
it's during.
No. Yeah, how speed is worded is basically it's a trigger that only happens once per turn. Like when your opponent loses life, increase speed. This only triggers once per turn. Is I believe like the wording or close enough that it's the same.
I assumed it was something else.
Yeah. It only triggers once per turn and only on your turn. Yes.
Right. That's for example why I like the black draw spell, which makes both players lose 2 life, because that's a good way of not having to attack, accruing value, and increasing your speed at the same time.
Yeah. So I believe,
assuming you had started your engines by that point.
By assuming that you started your engines, yeah.
I believe the fastest you can get max speed online is turn 4, because there's the only things that start your engines on turn 1 is there's a white 1-drop, which can't immediately, like if you play that, you can't damage your opponent. And there's some colorless lands that start your engines, but there's no ginger brute in limited, there's no way to like deal damage to your opponent with that. Yeah, so there's no way to get to 2 on turn 1, but you can get to 2 on turn 2 and then 3 on 3 and 4 on 4. But yeah.
I mean, probably there are some kind of fringe cases where opponent damages yourself after you played one of your very few 1-drops that have started the engine. But let's not go there.
I don't know.
On your turn?
I don't know if that actually can happen.
Bring back mana burn. Damn it. Okay, we have exhaust. And exhaust is just an activated ability that you can only activate once in the game. Not once per turn, just once in the game.
Yeah, the alchemy mechanics are making their way to paper.
Yeah,
I mean,
I've been jokingly calling this mechanic adapt because almost all of the cards with exhaust, except the rare ones, put 1 or more +1/+1 counters on themselves as that's their justification for bringing this into paper of like, oh, it's okay. They'll remember which things have exhausted because those things will have +1/+1 counters on them. I'm sure they'll remember.
I'm just lasering around loot, which has 3 exhaust abilities and no counters.
Yeah.
The best part is if loot ever sees play and constructed along with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, and you have a wide board of many creatures with +1/+1 counters on them, each of which has activated a different loot ability, it'll be amazing.
I mean, Jason, are you really? Can you with a straight face say if loot sees constructed play with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, or will we go straight to when loot sees play constructed with Agatha's Soul Cauldron?
All I'm saying is that saying the things I said, whether or not I'm interested in making loot work and constructed, is all part of my range. You can't get information from me.
But yeah, these cards are mainly in Timor colors. So red, blue, green. As loot is, there's a couple of artifacts and a couple of weird ones like winter that we mentioned, which is in Dimir. So it sort of tries to be good early and good late, where early you can play like a small creature. Late in the game, when that creature is outsized by the rest of the board, you activate the exhaust and you get some kind of value or make them bigger and therefore relevant. So it's like a chase for relevance. Some cards have multiple exhaust abilities. Each of those can be activated once. So if you have this Draconautics Engineer, you can exhaust for a red, and other creatures you control gain haste until end of turn, and you put a +1/+1 counter on the Engineer. Or you can activate for 4 mana, 3 and a red, and you can make a 4/4 dragon creature token with flying. So you can activate each of those once. Activation is at instant speed, so make sure that you don't attack into open mana and exhaust creature that will become bigger in combat. Again, blinking, copying, returning from graveyard, whatever, resets the ability to use exhaust. So that's the end of it. And it seems like a good value kind of mechanics that allow you can build a deck that is aggro, but it will still have the late power because all your cards will have this second life when you activate the exhaust on them and will do something. And a bunch of them also will give you card selection, like this Keen Buccaneer that is a 3 mana 2/3, but with vigilance. But for 2 mana, I can draw a card and discard a card and put a +1/+1 counter on this thing. So you get some card selection. And there's a couple of other cards that do similar things.
The weirdest form of resetting exhaust abilities is there's a mythic, the Mimeoplasm, that like enters as a copy. Like it exiles a creature from your graveyard, or creatures from your graveyard when you cast it, and you can pay mana to turn it into a copy of an exiled creature. And if you do that and then activate the exhaust ability, you can then reactivate its ability to recopy the creature, and it'll like I'm 90% sure that you can activate the exhaust ability again.
Oh, good. That answers my question, because I was playing Amulet last Friday night, and I was thinking if I reactivate the shifting woodlands on my copying the Dryad, will I be able to play another land because it's a new copy of Dryad, basically? But I think
that one is different.
Okay, so why?
All right, let's get Dom Harvey in the chat. Okay,
I don't know for sure, but I think that one might be different. I'd have to dig through things.
You're a judge, for God's sake.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Anyway,
hey. The best way to judge is to reference documents all the time, and I don't have time for that right now.
Cycling, the slowest way of racing, but somehow made it to the Aetherdrift. There are 26 cards.
Oh, I get it now. I only just got that. Nice.
There you go. 26 cards across all colors, but they are centered, I guess, around blue-red, because that has synergies for cycling, for discarding cards, which cycling does. 6 cards have some additional effect of what happens when you cycle this card. For example, you have this Valorous Flagship, which makes pilots for cycling it into your graveyard. Synergy with when you draw things or when you discard things, and also can fuel the graveyard synergies as well, because there are some larger creatures with cycling that you can later reanimate. And cycling is on several cards that might otherwise only be of sideboard use, like the Fuel the Flames we mentioned. Locust Spray probably wouldn't be playable without the cycling ability on it. And potentially neither would be... what other cycling thing that we had that we were saying that... Oh, yeah, like the thing that destroys an artifact, for example. Also, notably, there is the... common land that enters tapped, and you can choose a color when it enters that has cycling for 3, which is like a good upgrade on the traditional land enters tapped. You pick a color because late in the game,
upgrade, but
it was always good. Now it's just better. I mean, I think that's a neat upgrade.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes it better in the sort of aggressive decks where you don't want to draw your 5th land or something.
I think they really looking at the cycling in the set. It looks like they're like trying to learn from the mistakes of Ikoria. Where like in Ikoria, a lot of things had cycling 1. This set a lot of things have cycling 2, and all the things with 1 mana cycling all cost colored mana. Like,
yeah, no, they definitely learned.
I really feel the like we're not having Zenith Flare happen again.
And it's, also, like, it's less ham-fisted as an approach. There's fewer of them, and they are like. Really, I think they thought through which cards should have cycling and which not. Also, the fact that there is no strictly cycling synergies, but it's based on discarding a card, allows them to expand the range of cards that they can use for that, with Ramage, with looting, with whatever.
But
I think it's a neat approach. Yeah, loot doesn't loot.
Indeed.
Okay, mana fixing. That's usually where Jason takes over and tells us their thoughts about. Go.
Okay. Well, so
start your engines.
So mana fixing the set. I think there seems to be less than usual. I think. And part of this is I think that the mana, like they've been making some like okay manaliths recently, where it's like. Okay, Manalith is a pretty bad card usually, just like straight up Manalith. It is like usually quite unplayable, but like they'll add something to the Manalith that makes you go like, oh yeah, okay, maybe I'll play this in my deck because I can loot with it with network, network terminal or whatever it's called, or like Sunburn Standard. That was a banger, yeah. But this time they really didn't do that. I would not suggest putting starting column in your deck. It looks like it's basically just Manalith because the decks that want Manalith probably can't get max speed very easily, and the decks that can get max speed very easily probably can't. Probably don't want a Manalith, so don't play that. But we have some other fixing. Only one other thing common, really, the bike. I really do like the bike. My joke is that it is. Ancient Cornucopia from Big Score. Anyways, so I with the like gain lands, right? So like other than the stuff on the screen, from your lands, there's the gain lands which are in 50% of packs, like we usually see when they print like common or when they print like land slot duels, and we have that one Evolving Wilds or not Evolving Wilds, Uncharted Haven variant, the one with cycling that we were talking about. And like generally what this means is if without like very much fixing, which we don't have very much of outside of the lands, and with only that set of lands, that usually means we're looking to play like 2-color decks with a splash, and like only very, very rarely will you do like more than that, right? Like you should try to be 2 colors, sometimes with a splash. If you're looking to like splash 2 different colors or to play like a full 3-color deck, you have to be really, really, really careful that you have enough fixing, because there really isn't that much. One card that is missing from this set is from this slide of cards is there's a red 2-drop. It's a Fable token when saddled, kind of. It's a 2-mana 2/2 with saddle 1. When it attacks while saddled, make a treasure. That one is interesting in terms of fixing, in that it can be. I think it's fixing more in the sense of like Gold Vein pick than in the sense of like other kinds of fixing, because you do need to have like a good curve to make that work. But we'll see how that plays out. Mostly, I just want to say like, don't try to go too like I know I often try to go too hard with mana in most sets. Don't try to go too hard with mana in this set.
Yeah, this really does look like a 2-color set, more or less.
Yeah,
like there'll be some there'll always be like some like green soup deck, which I know Jake has, which I'm excited to look at.
My thing is, it just seems like there aren't a ton of rewards for splashing. It seems like a lot of your better or bombier things are double pipped, and they're really trying to keep people on rails. So it's going to take a lot of incentive, and I don't know. I wasn't impressed. So
yeah, I do agree with Talvi in the chat with Timur Exhaust being potentially a deck that will be 3 colors to some extent.
Yeah,
And also Esper artifacts, I think, because of the density of artifacts being, in my opinion, a problem, you might need to play the Esper versions to make sure that you have enough enablers and payoffs mixture.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about like being Teamer exhaust is like there's enough exhaust things in like all the colors that you probably don't need to, right? Like, yeah, you could play a longer game and you could be 3 colors, but like it's not like you don't. The reason to be 3 colors, like fully 3 colors as opposed to a splash, isn't just so I can like play more of like some like density of cards or something. Like usually you can just find good cards in your colors, right? It's specifically if there's like some really important like singular cards that are like really important pieces. Like, okay, maybe if you're red green exhaust, then then like maybe you really want the blue green uncommon vehicle or something. I'm not sure. Like that could be a really strong exhaust card, perhaps.
Or just
but
loot.
like yeah, sure. Yeah, if you open loot, you are likely to be more 3 colors. But like, I don't know, your blue green deck is not gonna like play red for this boost buggy, right? Like you're not gonna do that.
It might play for the other one,
maybe
the other one,
the other signpost. Yeah, I'm only saying it because I put it in my swimming deck, so I'm definitely going to be defending that.
The Gruul 3-drop, you mean?
Yeah.
The one that makes the Thopter when you exhaust?
No, that's the blue-green. That's the blue-green.
No, but
it's the one that reduces the costs of exhaust abilities.
But then if you do that, then like this is a strong chance before you get your red to cast that thing, you've already, exhausted some cards, right? So it's a lot worse than it is in.
Yeah, but you exhausted them again because you have the Elvish Refueler, so that's all good. It's all accounted for.
Yeah, if you stack your deck,
But I'm just saying that sometimes you will have a deck that will want to ramp to some amount, and while you are ramping, you will just naturally fix your mana, and you will be able to play those 3 colors in those kind of decks potentially. Yeah,
we're going so fast, we're just rolling over all these puns, ramping on rails, like we're leaving all this value on the table.
Well, we have to because you're going soon. So
that's really true. I'm like leaving in a few minutes here.
Okay, we have mana fixing lands. We have the gain lands. Keep in mind they are commons, but they are actually more closer to uncommons in terms of how often they are in the pack. You get roughly 2.2 commons per pod, and you have roughly 1.2 of the gain lands per pod and 0.9 uncommons per pod of each uncommon card in the set. So they're closer to uncommons in terms of the rarity. You have the Verges. They reprinted the rest of the cycle. So you have the enemy color ones. And you have the Night Market, which we discussed before. The cycling 3 land, which seems quite good. And I would pick it quite highly. Gold uncommons. There's 20 of them. 2 for each color pair. One of them is a vehicle or a mount. And one of them is a non-vehicle / mount. So there you go. Most pairs have 1 creature and 1 non-creature, but there are exceptions. The 8 green touching cards are all CMC 2 or 3 or double pipped in both colors. There's a quite variety of power levels here, but most of the bangers seem to favor aggro. Not my words, but it does seem so. Look at Lagorin, Soul of Alacria, sorry. A 1/1 that when you saddle it becomes a 2/2 and it's a flyer that can get away with the game very quickly if you don't have a way of dealing with. Or Cloudspire Coordinator, 2 mana 3/1 when it enters Scry to fix your draw, and whenever you play a mount or a vehicle, you can tap it to create a pilot, which is pretty good because you broaden up the base of things that can crew those vehicles in your deck without having to put in an extra creature. Okay. Then we move to the archetypes finally. And normally we did it that we talked about each color pair finished, and then we talked about the decks that we built. I changed it for this version. We are going to talk about, in a similar layout, about the signposts for each color pair, about the enablers, payoffs, and key cards that are not really fitting the enabler or payoff criterion. And then straight from that, we go into the draft skeleton that one of us built. And we can discuss how it's being made. Each of those introduction slides, I built them. So if you have any complaints about what is on them, direct them straight to me, please. And don't blame my collaborators. Thank you. Blue-white. It says artifacts value, and the signposts are 6 or 7 mana. One of them is a 6 mana vehicle. It is a 6/5 with Vigilance Crew 2. And when it enters, you may search your library for an artifact. You can put it on the battlefield if its mana value is 2 or less, or you put it in your hand. So basically like a tutor for artifacts. That cheap artifact goes straight to the battlefield. Or Voyage Home, a sorcery for 7 mana, but it has affinity for artifacts, so it costs less for each artifact you control. And it just says to draw 3 cards and gain 3 life. How do we find those signposts?
I think Voyage Home is what it's about.
Yeah. I do like that the 6/4 vehicle crews itself, theoretically. So it's like, one of those nice vehicles that you don't have to, that can count as a creature itself. But certainly Voyage Home is the more powerful of the two, the more splashy of the two, I guess. I don't know.
By the way,
I feel like Voyage Home's kind of a hat on a hat in this deck where like you don't have trouble accruing value over the course of a game. It is nice to help stabilize, like the 3 life is not nothing, but I would be more concerned about how people close games with this deck.
So what you're saying is you want the 6/4.
6/5. It's a 5.
Well,
6/5, yeah.
You have the Gearseeker Servant. That's like one payoff. You have the guy like a synergist. This is the flyer. I mean, I think it's basically
it's there. It's on the slide.
Yeah, it's right there. But like
I put the finisher.
The things are here.
What you don't have is the affinity one, like the 5 mana affinity 3/4. The blue card, the new whatever that card was from Mirrodin, but better. That card seems like another
the uncommon.
Yeah, it's uncommon.
Yep.
That seems like another way to close.
Like Sergo, when you go back and do your like, hey, these were the traps, these were the actual good cards in this archetype. I think Quick Welder is going to be one of those like trap cards. I don't think that there are a lot of like artifacts I really care about reducing cost, other than like sometimes you just need to dump your hand after a Voyage Home, and it will be nice to like double or triple spell. But I'm not sold on
I think that I don't care that much about the 1 mana cost reduction. I care about the 2/4 body.
Okay.
Well,
The 2/4 body,
I feel like
2 mana is reasonable.
So the 1 mana cost reduction would be nice if you're playing like this, like 6 mana artifacts, like the other signposts, right? So it cuts both ways.
Yeah, I mean, I put it there as an enabler because it makes your stuff cheaper, basically. Also, it is an artifact on its own, and there's not that many. There's not that many artifacts that I would be happy to put that I can play early in the game. Like, for 1 mana, there's a couple of uncommons maybe, and there's the 1 mana, the thing that you can sacrifice to deal 3 or pay 6 mana to destroy a creature. And if you want to activate those affinity things early, you need those cheaper artifacts. And Voyager makes other artifacts cheaper. Also is a relatively cheap artifact with a decently sized body for what you're trying to achieve in this particular archetype. That's why I put it on the list. But anyway, we can discuss it when we go through Zach's skeleton. But I put like things like Transit Mage. This is a 3 mana 2/2 that allows you to search for an artifact with mana value 4 or 5, which is nice because it can go help you with the natural curve when you go turn 3 this, turn 4, let's say the guided synergies or something that costs 4 mana, and then you have this order of playing things. You have Nimble Thopterist, which is a 3/2 that makes a 1/1 Thopter, which I think would be nice if it was a 3 mana 2/2 that makes a Thopter, but I guess we're not living in that world. A couple of cards that I marked here as key cards that not necessarily tap into any of the synergies is Right's End. That's the 5 mana removal spell, but it costs 3 less if you target a tapped permanent and you exile target creature or vehicle. This, because I do think that this deck does not have offensive tools that are good enough, so it will play a bit of a slower game, and the slower the game, the better this kind of removal gets. And flood the something.
Engine?
The engine.
Yeah.
Flood the engine. There you go.
Dude.
That's the new
cars.
version of the Charmed Sleep that is much better than Charmed Sleep, and I think that they finally figure out some kind of a formula that is acceptable for removal.
Did they? They keep trying. Did they yet? Did they?
Acceptable. I didn't say good. I said acceptable. It is
Fair
acceptable. The fact that it removes the abilities is important, because that was the most annoying part of Charmed Sleep, when you tapped something and it was generating value turn after turn because it had additional things to do. Not perfect,
enough.
but a step in the right direction. It's not Unable to
Certainly.
Scream, which I think was figuring out the perfect
Yeah,
solution.
that card was great.
But it's a step into the right direction nonetheless, and especially in a set where there's not so much enchantment removal present, apart from Broken Wings, that will be again painful to see when you play a bunch of Flood the Engines. Zach, your deck. We have the list here, so talk us through it.
I think this is just being very fast because we have to bounce, but I think this is basic. This is pretty basic bitch affinity, right? Like, I don't know if we're allowed to swear. Apologies. But like, I really like these the Midnight Wrangler or whatever it's called, the Moat Piranhas or whatever, because it's a vehicle, it's an artifact, it defends, and I would just like, you really just want to have like maximize. If I'm seeing this deck like all will be one, right? The blue white deck and all will be one, just like, as getting your artifact count as high as possible. And to actually get some value from Voyager Quick Welder, to be able to like dump some of the more expensive artifacts onto the battlefield.
Okay, I mark cards that you found more important. So the Voyager Quick Welder, I guess that it helps you to curve this into, let's say, the Spike Shell Harrier, the 5 mana 4/4 that will cost now 4 mana.
Or like Mole Drifter, the Mole Drifter variant.
Or the Mole Drifter variant will also cost 4 mana, so maybe that's or the 5/4 vehicle that comes with the Thopter. That's also something that you can sort of curve neatly using the Quick Welder. Another card that you had is the Midnight Mangler. That's the 3/3 that is a creature on blocks, but to attack with it, you need to crew it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's one of the easier conditions to fulfill with this type of creature historically, because they print so many of those blue 2 mana 3/3s that basically have a defender and lose it when you do something. And
and they're all okay. Like, you play usually all of them.
in some decks, yeah. They are usually not the kind of a card that you put in every blue deck, but there is 1 or 2 homes for it. And I think that this one, blue-black and blue-white, seem like quite a natural home for those.
And I think this deck is like winning with like some evasive threat, which you have a selection of, and your just goal is to hold the ground until you like build up your artifact count to like, make your things into threats.
Also, you put the interface ace in there. Can you elaborate?
Ace.
It's an artifact. Like you said, there's not that many artifacts. You need to like have as many artifacts as possible. It's not a very good card in this deck, but it sure is an artifact, and it can pilot the Hull Drifter or whatever, which is kind of nice.
And still be left to block.
Yes.
So that's a neat thing. I think it's a neat deck. I have to say, I'm not. I was listening to Lords of Limited, and they were singing praise of how great Azorius and Dimir is. I'm having my doubts when I saw the spoiler so far, but I am willing to be convinced. Hopefully, that there is a 3-color version of it existing. Also, these are, I assume, your finishers, and it's worth noting that they are either big or evasive, or both. So that's, I guess, the whole plan of blocking, clogging the ground, and then finishing the game with the Gearseeker's Serpent or the Guidelight Synergist, which can be, I don't know, a 5/4 or 6/4 if you play it well.
Memory Garden. That's the affinity card that we were talking about before.
Yeah, Memory Garden. You didn't put any rares in your.
No, I think I'm off rares for skeletons, unless it's something that's a build around.
Okay.
I
Fair.
agree. I've never really put rares in my skeletons.
Yeah, but you put 7 murders instead.
That was a symbolic thing. You know, I was just
Okay.
feeling especially murderous that day. Oh, can we go
Zach,
to mine next so that I don't
we
have
probably
to...
should do Zach because he needs to go in a minute.
Oh,
we
yeah.
can
I
do
didn't
one
realize
more
Zach had
for
another one.
Zach.
Okay, yeah.
That's not yours. That's not yours.
I wanted to do the this one, and
Yeah.
the one thing I want to say, since I am about to bounce, is that I noticed that there is a payoff. It's a little package of vanilla creatures, and there's a card that cares about vanilla creatures. Actually, there's a few cards. There's like a one that there's a 4-drop at least.
Fang Druid Summoner. That's the one.
Yes. And I
put
feel
the
like
laser.
Gruul has a density of pretty good vanilla creatures. I mean, there's this 3/2, there's the 4/2. They're
4/1.
aggressively costed, and like you have ways to give them trample, which is ways that you're pushing damage. And I was thinking that in this kind of deck, like you have some exhaust stuff to do, but you also have these like vanilla creatures which are going to hopefully stomp through your opponent's defenses.
Yeah, I'm surprised that given the fact that you're putting so much weight on trample and on pushing damage, you didn't also put the 5-mana green legendary vanilla creature, the 9/7.
Oh, I mean, like it's also. I mean, you could put that one in if you want, but it's also like what is it, 5 mana or whatever?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, the problem,
it carves out from the Fang Druid Summoner. Turn 4 Druid
Sure.
Summoner. Turn 5 9/7.
Obviously, you'll
green
play
is
it
a
in a lot of
problem,
decks.
but,
I think you'll play in a lot of decks, but like just like to pair it like Alex from Limited Level Ups, just any like 4 or 5 mana like spell or creature that doesn't have the ETB, like I mean, obviously, like it's big, right? But like your opponent can just murder it.
Yeah, they can. Then they wasted the murder. And keep in mind, if you play the Fang Druid Summoner, it can search for that creature
In the graveyard. That is nice. That is nice.
in the graveyard. It doesn't need to be library. First, you can find it in the library. Second, you can actually get the one that was killed by the proverbial murder or strictly better murder in this set. But I like the fact that as you can see, I highlighted the Gibrick Omnivore here because you put 2 of those. These are the vanilla 3/2s. I think that looks like a great card in this set.
I think that like this is their answer to that. You can't play a vanilla, 4 or 5 drop. Is well, let's make all of these effects that go and get us back. You have Rise from the Wreck, which is like gets you.
Yeah. I should have put that kind of card in this deck for sure.
Like they're just trying to give us alternate advantage engines, so you don't feel so punished for those cards. But I hear you; it does feel bad.
Okay. I think it's reasonable. I think with like I missed Rise from the Wreck where I was a little rushing, whatever. But I think that is the kind of card that you would like to play in this archetype for sure.
You also put the Stampeding Scaryfoot, and I also very much agree with that. I think that for the exhaust decks, this is a very important thing that establishes the early presence, and you can block those 3/1s attacking you early if you need to. And then later in the game, you can exhaust and make a 3/3 elephant, which is a neat update. And if you have the Elvish Refueler, which hopefully I marked here, you can basically start churning out 3/3 elephants every turn if you have the Scaryfoot, which is a neat thing to do. Obviously, the Refueler dies on sight, so that's a very theoretical probability there. But if it doesn't, you might have some engine value going on in there.
But Zach, like the way that this is built, it seems like that would be kind of like a bad like fail case for the deck. Like you want to be going pretty fast,
Sure.
right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like it is kind of stompy-ish. Like you have, things might not always work out the way you plan.
Sure.
But yeah, I agree. This is more of a mid-range, like long term, like plan card where you're like, oh, I'm going to get another 3/3. Like, oftentimes you're, if you have the combat trick, that will be enough. Anyways, I appreciate all of you. Yeah. I'm excited to watch while I try to.
Don't worry, we're just gonna slam your white, black.
That one I think is
make
abysmal.
fun of it while you're gone.
Yeah, please, Cinema Sins ding me for each poorly chosen uncommon.
Don't worry, I deleted the black red and put my version. Let's keep it at that.
Great. All right. Love you folks. Enjoy. I'll be watching.
And enjoy your evening/afternoon in wherever you are.
If you're in Minneapolis, I'm in a comedy show called Punchline Punch Out at 7 p.m.
And folks, before you ask, don't worry, he's not running it. He's just in.
Oh, I
the
do
audience.
have a show that I run February 26th called Fishbowl Comedy, also at Sisyphus Brewing. All right, bye.
I
He's a
I
friend of
would
Mike
also
Lester, the
like to leave
comedian.
before my worst skeletons.
Let's because I rushed to the skeleton of Zach and didn't go through the cards that we highlighted here. But basically, enablers will be things that have exhaust, and payoffs will be things that give you something extra for exhaust in this kind of deck. I put the Procatcher Specialist. That's the 2-mana haste 2/1 because I think that 2-power creatures with haste are always spiking my attention in. Especially when you have like any kind of start the engine things that can get there from nowhere. This one has exhaust for 4, and you put 2+1/+1 counters on it. So technically, it can be a 6-mana 4/3 haste creature in the late game, which is not too bad as a surprise kind of attack. Scary Foot, I think, is important because it can make creatures, and when you want to reuse those abilities, when you have like the Elvish Refueler, it's risky to pile up extra counters on one creature because that again leaves you open to murder or something like that. But broadening your board and making elephants seems like a safer strategy for reusing those exhaust abilities whenever you can do that. And I put Greenbelt Guardian because that card looks like a banger to me. That's a 2-mana 2/2. It has exhaust for 4 mana. Put 3+1/+1 counters on this creature, and also for 1 green, it has target creature gains trample until end of turn.
That's such relevant text for a format that has a ton of pilots running around and like just a bunch of like little shitters that are going to get in your way.
Vehicles are also bigger than usual. Like vehicles make stat lines a bit bigger than usual.
And they are not but bigger; they are power bigger. Also, I noticed that lots of them will be like 6/3, 5/4. There is the 9/7. I mean, extreme case, and I put it in my black-red skeleton. There's the 7/2. Give it trample. You're putting in the chunk of damage through that, and that's hopefully
also trample helps you it helps you build speed.
Yeah, that's true. Also, you can pay 1 green and commit a crime by giving trample to a creature opponent controls. There is no crime payoffs or crime existing in that set, but I thought for you constructed folk, maybe something to think about.
This is definitely the green 2-drop of choice for committing crimes. Definitely.
In terms of the
sorry, go ahead.
In terms of the payoffs, I have the refueler that allows you to reuse the exhausts and also has exhaust itself, so or themselves. So you can, even if it's the only creature you have, you can just pile up 1+1/+1 counters on it every turn. But if you have other payoffs, you can, like this Scary Foot, you can make 3/3s. If you're so lucky that you have the 2-drop that can make dragons, you can make dragons in return. That's going to be fun.
There's don't want to play Refueler like on 3 though, right? Like that's kind of like a nightmare.
That's wait till they kill everything and play it as your last creature. Please do that. There's also Adrenaline Jockey. That's a 3-mana 3/3. It has this weird thing that whenever any player casts a spell not on their turn, it deals 4 damage to them. And whenever you activate an exhaust ability, that thing gets +1/+1 counters. So 3-mana 3/3 that can grow relatively easy in those decks is something that I'm moderately interested in. I'm not going to go out of my way to pick it, but it looks like something I'm not going to be unhappy to put in my deck. And there's an Afterburner Expert, which is a 3-mana 4/2 exhaust to put 2+1/+1 counters on it. And whenever you activate an exhaust ability, if this thing is in your graveyard, you can return it from graveyard to the battlefield, which is good.
Brutal.
It is good to the point where I want to put it also in my decks that are self-milling, and I have a couple of exhaust things just accidentally. Other key cards, I put the Thunderhead Gunner, and I actually was curious about your takes on this, because this looks like not bad to me. Okay, it's a 5-mana, true, but it's a 4/5 with reach, and you can discard a card to draw a card, and you can activate it as a sorcery once each turn. So basically get a free rummage, not a loot, without even tapping the creature. That's like Oblivious Bookworm kind of territory.
It's decent, I would say.
Yeah, I would have this as like a fairly average card. When I look at like Zach's skeleton, that's more how I see this deck aligning, as opposed to like, hey, I need something with reach that's going to like stabilize me and like help and then rummage. Like I guess I just hope I have a more proactive plan than that. Oh no.
What are you doing?
I don't know. My hand. Oh no.
Oh no, you froze. Perfect moment. And I have a plow through. I just wanted to highlight that I guess green creatures are more conducive to playing a fight spell for 1 mana that also can destroy a vehicle on site. So, 40 vehicles in the set in every color. You will probably most of the time find a target for it. And fight for 1 mana is not great at sorcerer speed. But I guess combining the two might make it mildly playable. And if it's playable somewhere, it's probably the green-red, which will have bigger creatures on average. Any comments on that, Jason?
One thing I will note is that a lot of the exhaust stuff that like mostly grows bigger, like that's the point of it, is to grow bigger. There's a decent amount of threat of activation, right? With the 2/1 haste, if you like attack with it into your opponent's like 2/2, they're just not gonna, with 4 mana up, they're just not going to block.
I think the worst offender is the 3 mana 2/3 that for 3 mana can get a counter and double strike. Like, how do you deal with that card? Do you block? No. Do you let it in? You potentially take 6 damage. So what do you do? Anyway,
you kill it. Yeah.
That's the way. But removal is pricey in this. There's not so much removal, honestly.
We should go to my skeleton because I need to go soon.
It's 6. How long till 6?
Like 18 minutes.
Okay, then let's go to the Golgari skeleton. So let's start with the introduction of the Golgari. You take over that one while I'm going to pull myself.
Yeah, so Golgari has a lot of stuff with like graveyard synergy, as it usually does, and specifically reanimation. So the 2 signpost uncommons like really signpost that, right? Where you have the Broodheart engine that reanimates things, and the Thundering Broodwagon that has cycling and costs 6, so it's nice to reanimate. But like and so like it's very, the direction points very much at reanimation, and there's also a bunch of other things that like fill the graveyard and benefit you for like using the graveyard, like the Dredger's Insight, like as an impulse that gains you life whenever something leaves your graveyard, that like incentivizes you to use your graveyard somehow. For example, with the like Sanitarium Skeleton-esque 2/2, or I guess Durable Coil Bug is a better comparison for that one. Like return it from your graveyard to your hand for 4 mana and play it as a 2/2. Like that kind of thing. Like it incentivizes you to have some graveyard synergies, but like none of it is super dedicated, is what I would say. Like there's nothing that's like there's not really that many cards that are like, oh yeah, like you like really want to like turbo fill your graveyard and then this will be really good. The closest thing to that is Ooze Patrol, but because there like just isn't that much stuff to fill your graveyard and there isn't that much stuff to like that cares about your graveyard, I suspect that you like mostly won't be doing that much like dedicated graveyard synergy and so much as like playing good cards and notably reanimating them, because there are some very powerful reanimation spells. So next slide, please. Okay, so specifically the card that I am extremely interested in this format. I don't know if you can tell which of these cards that I most like out of this whole deck. I don't know if you can tell which card, which copy of Migrating Catrodon is the most important linchpin of this deck. But did you know that they gave Humming Mammoth like 3 more things? Or something, or maybe 2 more things. Cycling
Absurd.
and reach. Cycling and reach. Really? But like
just for free. For free.
Yeah. So like Honey Mammoth has generally been pretty good, right? 6 mana play that like blocks well on the ground and stabilizes you a bit by gaining you life. Like it makes up for the fact that it's a 6-drop by gaining you life, and it is big. Your opponent has to deal with it. It's hard to deal with it often, right? You can obviously murder it, but like it necessitates the murder. Like it there's some amount of difference between like playing a 4-mana 4/4 and then like sometimes it dies to a murder and like therefore you're sometimes sad about it, because like sometimes one thing about playing like smaller creatures that don't get value on ETB is that like when sometimes they get murdered, and that's part of the problem, but also sometimes they don't have to be murdered either, right? Like just a 4-mana 4/4, sometimes your opponent can ignore it, right? Whereas like a 6-mana 6/6, your opponent cannot ignore. And obviously, it still dies to murder, but at least it gained you 4 life as well. And that's just the Silver Honey Mammoth. Now, Migrating Ketrodon, it also has reach. So it's really, really hard to not deal with it because it just blocks everything, right? There is nothing in the format that it doesn't block.
No shadow this time.
Well, okay, there might be, they can't block Gear Serpent, I guess. Sure. And it's somewhat bad at blocking small death touch creatures to prevent your opponent from gaining speed. But like, reach is just huge on when you're playing like a big creature to stabilize behind while blocking. And then we get to cycling. I don't know. One problem with 6-drops is that sometimes you don't have 6 mana. You know what's good when you don't have 6 mana? Being able to turn your 6-drop into a different card. Anyways, that's me done waxing poetic about Migrating Ketrodon. I'd like to say that there are 4 Migrating Ketrodons in this deck to represent that the four nice things about it. It's big, it gains life, it has reach, and it's cycling.
So are you telling me that there's only one good thing about the Shephet Archfiend?
It has cycling. Anyways, so the thing about this deck is Migrating Ketrodon is a great card. Banger, just play. I think you're just allowed to play as many as you can get. Like, okay, maybe the 6th one will be bad, but like
leave it to Jason to promote playing any number of copies of a 6-drop.
Well, it has cycling. Anyways, the nice thing,
Imperial Oath did not, and still you postulated.
But that card was really good. Anyways, just like this one. The fact that it has cycling is also nice for reanimation. You can cycle your Ketrodon away early, and then like bring it back with back on track, and then you also make a pilot. It's nice. The Thundering Broodwagon is another one that's like, okay, that one is a bit less good on as a 6-drop, I think. Even though it's a gold uncommon compared to a single color common, like I think the Broodwagon is more conditional in being good than the Ketrodon in that it kills something when it comes down, but like you do need to have something in play to crew it, otherwise you might have a bit of a 6 is still a lot of mana, and specifically the mana cost and stuff on that one. But that one especially is really nice if you can reanimate it. But basically, there's just all these there's all these cards that you're already playing that are really good, really good top end that just happen to have cycling, right? So you don't need to go out of your way to do things, right? Like that's why I only have 1 copy of Dredger's Insight and 1 copy of Portable Pot Mole Hole here. In order to the self mill can be nice, but it's really not necessary to enable your reanimation. You can just play your good cards.
Just to put to your point, most of the stuff that have self mill are uncommon. The Pothole Mole is the only self mill card per se that has mill 3 that is a common, because you have the Dredger's Insight, you have the Carrion Cruisers, all those things are uncommon, so you won't get that many. And when I look at your list, you could actually play it without mill at all. You can just drop your land drops, you can ramp with the Velohard Bike, and you cast your first Ketrodon. Then when they kill it, you can reanimate it, and you're happy as a clown.
Well, when your reanimation targets are just good to cast, you don't need to discard or build up. That's the other thing, right? Yeah, you can just cast your big thing and then get it back on track after it dies, right? Because it will have to die if your opponent. Well, okay, they could exile it or tap it down or something.
There's not much exile removal.
There's not that much, but. But basically your opponent will have to deal with it, and chances are their way of dealing with it will let you reanimate it. In general, Okay, I'm not saying that I'm like really high on like reanimation, like as like, oh, I think this is the best color pair. I just think that like Ketradon is very strong, and it like makes it very easy to play a good like black-green reanimator deck. Also, I will note I don't have very many black cards on this slide very intentionally because you do not need to be black. You mostly need to be green. Because I think this reanimation strategy is most like, okay, so the things that aren't Ketradon on this slide, right? The big things, the Archfiend, the Chariot, and the Broodwagon. Obviously, Broodwagon is kind of nice, but it, requires you to be black-green to cast it. Chariot, like, okay, that's like kind of nice, but you need to be white for it. Which like pulls you away from black. And Chef at Archfiend, I would not generally want to put that in a black deck, right? I don't care that much about casting the Archfiend. I'm more thinking about it as like, okay, this could be another reanimation target, right? So it's like, okay.
There's a question in the chat that since the skeleton has only 14 cards, how do you fit the other 9? Is it 9 more Ketradons or?
No, yeah, it's definitely 9 more Ketradons, but that's what I'm getting at, which is like, okay, the shell here that like I'm actually trying to get at is like the important parts is the reanimation, the Ketradons, and like I think the Veloheart bikes are also very good as just a very nice like piece of ramp into Ketradon, or just like anything that like helps you ramp into Ketradon to like cast Ketradons fairly is nice, right? But like beyond that, like those are just green cards, right? So like you can play whatever. You don't like, you can splash back on track. You can even maybe splash the artifact reanimation. That one's a bit sketchier. There's also a white reanimation spell that only hits artifacts, so it doesn't get Ketradon, but can get something like Thundering Broodwagon or Detention Chariot. So like I don't know, just play whatever color's open. I had a red-green deck that was kind of this, with like red cards.
Wait, so are you prioritizing like defensive speed? Like, obviously, it's great to be able to ramp into your threats. You don't want to dedicate too much or too many slots to defensive speed if you do have a ramp plan. But like, well, I don't know. Like, I guess I'm confused. Like, what your middle turns look like.
Well, you I don't know, just play good 2-drops. Like you don't need something to be like, the thing is that like all of the stuff that's on this slide is like self-contained powerful kind of, or like the Ketradons and the bikes just by themselves are like work, right? They don't need anything else to like help them, right? You don't need to do something in particularly early turns so that your Ketradon is good. Your Ketradon will just be good. So like you just spend your early turns like doing whatever, right? Like I don't know, whatever the best green 2-drop ends up being, whatever the best like.
But the one that gives trample to Ketradons, clearly.
Right, like you basically what this skeleton is describing is like this is half of your draft, right? Like this is half of your draft, and like you pair it together with whatever the other half of your draft wants to be, right? And probably the other half of your draft needs like specifically for the early game half of your draft, right? And like. I'm not basically the skeleton is not making a claim on what that half will be, but like probably, I don't know, you play some removal, you play some 2-drops, I don't know, play mid cards, bombs,
so
you have them.
What do you think about Rise from the Wreck?
Rise from the Wreck, it's just a nice grindy thing, right? That like Rise from the Wreck is the card that also plays well with Ketradon because, you don't need to put it directly on, like I said, the plan of like casting the Ketradon and then just getting it back with your reanimation, you don't need to cheat it into play, right? You can just cast it. It's just good enough that you can just cast it fairly. So like Rise from the Wreck is another like form of that,
So would you be going out of your way to try to find as many targets for it, or just happy getting 2 cards back from it?
Well, I think like in a deck like this, like you're generally pretty happy to play a Soul Salvage, especially when Ketradon has cycling, because you might like cycle a Ketradon earlier, and then you want a Ketradon in your hand, and it's turn 5, and you're like, I don't have a Ketradon in my hand, but I cycled one earlier, so I can get it back now, right? So yeah, getting 2 cards is fine. You can
vanilla
play, like,
will be good in it. No.
Yeah. You can play the 2-mana 3/2 vanilla just to trade off for Rise from the Wreck. Like the bikes can trade off for Rise from the Wreck. you can play a really good card, a really good mount to play that enables Rise from the Wreck is the 2-mana Death Toucher. That just trades off very well. Like you just want things that trade off in these kinds of decks. And the philosophy is just like, eventually I will have more stuff. My things just outstat you, and you're not going to be able to like get through my blockers efficiently enough to like actually aggro me out. And I will eventually have more stuff than you and win that way.
Basically, if you sum it up, it's a green X attrition where part of the attrition may or may not be some self-mill / reanimation, because that can give you access to the graveyard as a resource, which there are a couple of cards that can play into.
I would say it's attrition, but it's attrition in the sense that it relies on like okay. Attrition kind of implies that you're having both players go down resources, whereas like this is more just like attrition in the sense that like you're trying to play some very high impact cards, specifically Ketrodons, and then they will just they will just attrition your opponent out.
Attrition based on virtual card advantage. Let's put it.
But they can't deal with 3 of them, right? Like maybe they can deal with the first 2, but they have no plan for the 3rd or 4th, let alone the reanimated ones.
Okay. I think it's a pretty sweet build. I'm gonna definitely try it, and who knows how many Ketrodons I can get per pod or open in my pre-release. But yeah, it's a sweet looking deck.
Oh yeah, Ketrodons is also a banger sealed card in addition to being a banger draft card. Like
yeah,
it's probably even better.
It sounds like a big. Oh yeah, Brute Heart Engine. We didn't touch on this one.
Oh yeah, well yeah, it's just another reanimation thing. The upkeep surveil is nice. Like that's an effect that you see on some rares sometimes that also have like some other text. And it's always like nice, but it's really hard to evaluate exactly how good it is. It's especially nice that it like lets you put things into your graveyard to reanimate later. But it's like if you have something that doesn't have cycling, or you just don't want to like spend the 2 mana to cycle it. But like I don't know, it is a bit. I don't know how to evaluate it. It is a bit slow, right? You literally have to pay 6 mana into it, but.
Oh, and hopefully you get some value on the way. Okay, let's go to back a bit because we of course completely messed up the order because of who's leaving, who's not leaving. Dimir, Jake.
With that said, I think I will migrate like a Ketrodon and head out. But thanks for having me.
Yeah, gain for life. Gain for life.
I'm glad that I could rant about migrating Ketrodon. That's my only purpose here. Ravenous Lindworm, my beloved. Anyways, bye.
Bye. Thanks for being here. Right, Jake, just the 2 of us. And we need to finish a bunch still, because obviously they were dawdling and durdling.
Well, hey, we could just rip it. Come on, let's go.
Go. Tell me about the Dimir. It's your archetype, I think, that we're going to talk about.
So for me, I think that I'm not too concerned over.
By the way, someone in chat said, "Can you lower slightly the volume, because now that's going to be."
Oh, me?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that would be perfect.
All right, Chad, how's this? Is this better? I won't keep going until somebody lets me know. Great, perfect. So when I look at this, they call it Artifacts Bleeder. I don't really care for that. I am trying to go fast with this deck, and I really just want to treat Haunt the Network like it was the Aetherdrift version of Zenith Flare, right? I think it's going to end a lot of games just by virtue of making 2 little Thopters and then the drain effect. I think that this deck actually plays really well with Start Your Engines, and that you're not necessarily getting the best, max speed payoffs, but it's enough.
Okay. For the non-degenerates here, Haunt the Network is 5 mana, make 2 1/1 Thopter artifacts, and then you drain X, where X is the number of artifacts you control. So it would be minimum 2.
Yeah, minimum 2, but it's you have a Grim Bauble or 2 perhaps laying around. Yeah. I think that's part of the reason I'm higher on it than maybe some other people. And a lot of your threats are just kind of a little stickier too. You look at Wreckage Wickerfolk, for example. I don't know who wants to commit a lightning strike to that. I'm happy if they do, but I think that it really is a million little paper cuts. And, you know, it seems like, or the way I tried to build it was just kind of everything does a little bit of damage. Everything's going to be annoying. I think Pactol Terror is kind of like an obscene common. That's common, right?
Which one?
The Pactol Terror.
Oh yeah, that's a common. That's a 4-mana 3/4. When it enters, it drains 1, and whenever any other artifact you control enters, you also drain 1. So it's it's like a good way of quickly turn 4 Pactol Terror, drain 1, turn 5 haunt the network, 2 Topters, drain 2, haunt the network, drain 3. All of a sudden, those things start swinging quite badly. So before we go into your build, I think that the idea of this archetype is generally you play some artifacts and you have those effects that will drain and deal like 1 pink damage here and there. There are a couple of things that make Thopters that are 1/1 flyers, which will allow you to pink 1 damage here and there, like Nimble Thopterist. It's a 3/2 that makes a Thopter. There is the Wreckage Wickerfall, that's 2 mana artifact creature, that's a flyer with 1/3, and Surveil 2 that helps you to fix you those early draws. Grim Bauble is an artifact that will, add to your count of artifacts on the board while being a removal for the early threats of the opponent. Haunted Hellride, that's another signpost. It's a 3 mana 3/3 vehicle, and whenever you attack, target creature you control gets +1/+0 and death touch until end of turn, and you untap it. So all those 1/1s that you have can attack as a 2x 2/1 death toucher, and 2/1 death touchers are an annoying thing to block because you feel like you should, but most of the time you have to dedicate some proper resource to it. And if you put +1/+0 on the Topter, it will also be able to do evasive damage quite efficiently. Everything like giving +1 to something that has 1 power is so much better than giving +1 to something that has 2 power, because you increase by 100% the output of the damage of that particular thing.
Total. And you look at like Grim Javelineer is another like at common, similar effect. It's 2 and a black for a 3/2 at common, and if the creature dies, you get to surveil. But being able to like spread these effects out on a few different bodies too, I think it is really nice, and it doesn't seem like you're. I don't know, like you said, it like these little death touchers or like having to snap off removal on a Thopter is just always going to feel bad for your opponents. So
yeah, and part of Magic's charm is that feel good, the warm, comfortable feeling you have inside of your stomach when you know that you ruined someone's day.
Not wrong. You're not wrong.
I also added Risky Shortcut as one of the cards that might be interesting for this archetype. That's the 3 mana draw 2 cards. Each player loses 2 life. That's another bunch of small cuts. And I think the strength of it is that it doesn't have the same speed as the more aggressive out of the block stacks, but there is a lot of drain, and that drain swings the races in your favor very rapidly.
Like drain and gain is also important. This isn't just pinging your opponent down; it's also going to buy you a turn or 2 over the course of a game, which is huge.
Yeah, there's a combat trick that gives +1/+1 and lifelink and indestructible as well. So there's plenty of those things. So let's look through your deck. First thing I noticed, the cards that are in duplicates, where you have 2 haunted networks. So you clearly went all into the Zenith Flare strategy. You do have 2 Grim Baubles.
Listen, I'm going to get a second Haunt the Network in pack 3. That's where I reap all of my gold rewards. But yeah, I mean, I think that this is... I feel like a lot of these archetypes are fairly parasitic when you look at like Mardu vehicles-ish, a lot of the artifact matter synergies. I'm just trying to like pick up scraps from people. I do think that Grim Baubles are, relatively important in terms of just being able to like clear the way, keep my opponent off their early plan. Engine Rat just like makes things annoying too. I think that people aren't going to be too excited about Engine Rat and other archetypes. So I think it's very realistic to end your draft with 2 or 3 of these. And I don't necessarily. I'm not counting on the drain. I'm counting on getting speed.
It will
with
happen
these.
sometimes, though. I mean, it's good
Absolutely.
to have it in the range. As a 1/1 Death Toucher, it's already decent because it can play this early offense. Death Touch early in the game is usually called unblockability, and then later in the game, it's a good blocker that will threaten that if you don't attack into it, it will start chunking on your life total once you get to 6 mana. So it's not wrong. I was interested about the walking sarcophagus that you put 2 copies of.
Yeah, so I don't think anybody's going to really want. I don't know what skeletons were interested in walking sarcophagus. I
Maybe
want ways.
artifact ones, like white blue as well, or
Fair-
white black, because
I-
there's an overlap. And I mean,
Yeah,
it's sarcophagus. It's an Amonkhet card, and Amonkhet is white black in this set. So I guess that's what they're trying to hint at. Man.
I could see that. I think that these will be relatively free. I want to go like rat into sarcophagus. Okay, I'm at 1 speed. Are you going to block my rat, or are you going to let me get up to speed 2? And I generally want to force my opponents to make bad decisions regarding my speed because
Just play against me. You don't have to force me. I just make them on my own without any kind of. Anyway, sarcophagus, for those of you that are listening, it's a 2 mana artifact. It's a 2/1. It has start your engines, and when you get to max speed, it becomes a 3/3 basically.
Yeah, I think it's. I don't want people to forget you have to start your engines, and so becoming a 3/3 for 2 is like fine. I want to. I think the engine rat plus start your engines is a really great way to go up on mana, and I want to have mana advantages whenever possible when I'm playing these little, kind of like drain decks. I don't want my opponent to be able to feel like they're coming out ahead on mana because they're gonna. I think the games are gonna be tight.
Yeah, and also like you definitely are one of those decks that doesn't have to attack to get your speed up once you get it started, because you do have the risky shortcut, the draw spell that pings everyone for 2. You do have the Pactal Terror, the 3/4 that pings whenever an artifact enters. You have some threats that are going to come out of nowhere.
Totally.
On the network, obviously, also drains, which will create life gain, difference. You got the what is it called? Streaking Oil Gorger, the 3/3 flying haste. But if you have full speed, it gets also lifelink, which helps you race by quite a lot. And I think that this card might be low-key good in some decks. It reminds me a bit of the Bat Lizard from Bloomborough, which was fine. It doesn't have the drain effect automatically, but it is evasive. It does have haste, which counts as sort of like 1 mana discount on what normally would be a 3/3 flyer, which makes it a decent rate. And when it starts getting lifelink, then it becomes more oppressive than the Bat Lizard was in the Bloomborough.
Yeah, you've had. I learned about haste from you. I think you've had some great threads over the years, just about like the value of haste in limited, and I tend to ascribe to that now. I think that haste might still be a little undercosted by design, so I want to take advantage of that.
I see one of Bounce Off.
Yeah.
That's
I don't
the
really
unsummoned version of the. I mean, I think it's a jolly good card for this set. So I'm very keen on seeing how it will perform. Okay, well, you have Nimbletopterist. That's okay. Guideline Optimizer. That's the 2/1 that can tap for a blue, and you can only spend it for artifacts and abilities. Am I right?
Yeah, I think I'm higher on that than a lot of people.
I think you put it also in your Is It archetype, so we can talk about it there. And which one is Diversion Units?
Diversion Units, just the 2/1 flying uncommon. You can sack it
the
to
counter spell. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, just an evasive threat. That's kind of a flex slot, in my opinion. Just have something that has evasion.
Okay, well, that concludes the Dimir. So now we managed to do at least the 2 first ones. We moved to Black Red, and this one I made. So finally, I get my skeleton because I don't go early, because I stay till the end, and then edit, and then clean the kitchen, and then upload it hopefully for tomorrow. Anyway, that aside, Black Red is called Max Speed Aggro, and I think that it really does it. It just wants to. It's probably the one that has best tools to get full speed active the earliest. because you have the Gustle Thrill Seeker, which is the signpost that we talked about. It's a 2-mana 2/3. Start your engines. When it enters, it pings 1 damage and you gain 1 life, which means that if you start your engine with it, it automatically goes to 2, basically, because the ping comes after starting the engine. Plus, you have cards like Dynamite Driver, which can basically force your opponent to, unless they have a 0/8 Octopus, again, Octopus mentioned. If you attack with it, it either connects, which means that your speed goes up, or it gets blocked and dies. And that means that when it dies, it deals 1 damage to any target, which means it can ping the opponent and...
Oh yeah, opponents are targets.
Yeah. So you have good ways of getting the speed up, and then you can accrue those bonuses. Plus, of course, you have Lightning Strike, which can, push comes to shove, do that. And a card that I'm very high on before the set hits, Burner Rocket. That's a 2-mana 3/1 vehicle. It has flash, and when it enters, target creature you controls gets +2/+0 and trample. And that trample is important. It's like a take on the what was the 3/1 from Wilds of for Thrones of Eldraine?
I know what you're talking about.
Boulder something.
It goes on adventures.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
2/0 adventure. It kind of like made combat. You never wanted to jam it on 2, but sometimes you just needed to play. I know. Yeah.
Yeah. And Burner Rocket, I think, can play the same kind of role. Adding trample will allow you to sort of surprise-ish increase the speed. And once you can start already at speed 2 very early, that will be very important to get you to that max speed.
And threat of Burner Rocket is just going to be like so devastating for people that are trying to block. Like it's just going to haunt. It's going to haunt many people.
Yeah, and then you have the Apocalypse something. That's the vehicle, the second signpost. It's a 4-mana 6/5, but it also has it has crew 3, but it has the tap ability, and the tap ability is target creature you control with power 2 or less gains lifelink until end of turn and can't be blocked this turn. So this is another way of like, okay, it's turn 3. I'm at speed 3. Opponent developed a board that can block all my threats. They didn't attack in order to make sure that my removal doesn't wreck them. And I just play this Apocalypse Runner and tap it because it's a vehicle. I can tap it. It doesn't have Summon and Sickness unless I turn it into a creature. And give my 1/1 lifelink and unblockability until end of turn. And boom, I'm at speed 4. So
it's called the Protection from Ketradon, I believe.
Yeah, probably. Protection from Ketradon. That sounds like some kind of anti-drug program, because Ketradon for me literally sounds like some kind of a synthetic heroin replacement or whatever. So this is my black-red, and it is dedicated to pushing early damage. Part of that pushing early damage package is 2 Burner Rockets, because I can put 2, supplemented with both of the red and black vanilla creatures, because the red vanilla creature is a 2-mana 4/1, good to give it +2/+0 and trample, and the red vanilla creature is a 3-mana 7/2, also good to give it +2/+0 and trample, because that translates into a chunk of damage going through. You have 2 Dynamite Divers, the goblins that can sacrifice attack themselves to increase your speed 1 time. But also are a good attacker on turn 2. If you have like a turn 2 start the engine thing like the Endrider Catalyzer here, you start the engines with it and you attack with the Dynamite Diver early. I guess that having listened to your arguments about the engine rats, you can also interchange the divers with the engine rats, as they both will be. Oh, now you're black and white. Interesting. So yeah, that's part of it, and some evasive threats like the Wreckage Wicker Folk. I don't think that they're very important. I just put them to mention. This is a 1/3 flyer with that surveils when it enters. And apart from that, I also want to benefit from the fact that I got to this maximum speed. So my top end is comprised of the Aetherdrift, Spike Spitter, and Risen Necrogen, which but this is, by the way, the package of the Calaxian Hunger Tyrant, 3-mana 7/2, and Burner Rocket, giving it +2/+0 and trample. Neat. Some other ways of pushing the speed without having to attack is Outpace Oblivion. That one not starts your engines, which is 3 mana, deal 5 and an enchantment, and it starts your engine. But you can pay 2 sacrifices to deal 2 damage to a player that doesn't have max speed. So hopefully you can use it on time to ping opponent for 2 and go to max speed yourself. And Risky Shortcut, I have 2 copies of those as the last spell that you're casting to replenish your hand and deal 2 damage to the opponent and hopefully get to the max speed. And then this top-end package of End Riders, Spike Spitter, and Risen Necrogent. Spike Spitter is the 4-mana 3/4 with Reach. It does have Start Your Engine itself, but at max speed, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile the top card of your library and you can cast it this turn. So it basically draws you a second card each turn if you're at max speed. So if you did your job and got to the max speed, but the opponent is still at low life but not dead, this is the way of getting to those extra cards that will deal the damage directly to them, or find some kind of way of making it unblockable or whatever, and you will find damage by out-carding your opponent. While Risen Necrogen, when you have the max speed at the beginning of your end step, you make a 2/2 zombie. So if they don't deal with this thing on site, you basically start amassing this small army of zombies, and hopefully use that to push the last pieces of damage. And that's was my black and red. I would give it a B+. Thank you very much. I don't know what you think about black red, Jake. Oh, you're muted somehow. I don't know how, because I see your lips are moving, but no noise is coming out of it. I'll let you sort out your technical problems and solo my way through it. Oh, I know what happens. I have to add you to the stage. Now I will be able to hear you.
Okay, so I think the nice thing about Necrogent too is that this is a deck that's going to force your opponents to fire off a lot of removal early, that you are presenting a lot of threats. So it just really, if they have something left in the tank that can deal with this, then you're still most likely up a zombie, which is going to feel great. I don't know about Spike Spitter. That's interesting. You want the payoffs for max speed. It looks like one. Surviving a turn cycle is what it is. But this
is the part of the plan in this deck. I think that that's why I put 2, not 1, Risky Shortcuts, because they do not only deal those 2 damage, they also give me 2 cards, and hopefully I'm going to out attrition in a different way than Jason did with their deck, where it was, okay, I just put a 6/6, deal with it. Which I can do by Crash and Burn, I guess, but not much more than that. But what I can do is out attrition them by forcing them. If they don't use all their resources to kill my stuff, they are having a problem of being dead. While if they do use all their resources, they are short resourced themselves, and then my Risky Shortcuts become double important, because again, when you're both at 0 cards and you draw 2, that's a big boost compared to when you're both sitting at 5 cards and full of action on your games. So I try to make sure that the resources are depleted from both sides, and then I put on board something that will accrue me a large amount of resources.
Yeah, I'd also be interested in maybe the vehicle where they discard on ETB. I don't know how that's going to play out, but like just having something that serves as a negative on their side. And
I think instead of that, I put the 6/3 Menace vehicle, because then again, the thought is that can they commit 2 blockers to it when I start charging with it? Because 6 power and Menace is actually good, and I think that this card might be a bit underappreciated early in the format.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Okay, green-white. Who was supposed to do green-white? Was it you?
It's me.
It's me. I'm Mario.
It's me. They call this mid-range. I hate that. I really don't want to build Celestia mid-range here. I want to play as many cheap early mounts and vehicles as possible. Have my opponents in awkward positions where they either need to leave mana up or can't use their sorcery speed removal, and then start pounding my vehicles or mounts matter cards to follow them up and then swing.
I think that possibly they call it mid-range because the 2-drop is a 3/3 already. So
Yeah, it's
You start on turn 2, but by playing mid-range creatures.
yeah, it's I want to go really fast with this. I think that we will. I think that this will be a little bit more impressive. Selesnya for a little bit has felt off for me. I think that they nailed it in Aetherdrift, and that this is going to present a lot of like really complex combats. So when you have like key cards like Collision Course, which is like the choose one, deal X damage to target creature, where it's the number of permanents you control that are creatures and or vehicles, or destroy target artifact. That's like a really nice and a modal spell. But the Roadside Assistance was a card that really stood out to me in terms of like being 2 and a white for an aura that can enchant a creature or vehicle and immediately comes down, creates a pilot token, and gives a permanent +1/+1 and lifelink. A lot of the advantage, you're just going to be outstatting things so quickly. And so I look at it like, oh, if there was a card that was like pay 3 mana, get a 1/1 that gives something a +1/1 and lifelink counter, I'd be like, I'm interested. So
yeah, that's basically 3 mana at +2/+2 and lifelink, which is Armadillo Cloak-ish.
Yeah, it's like, oh hey, I like, and cards that like contain kind of multiple cards within them are always interesting to me. I think Roadside Assistance might be a little undervalued early, but yeah, I would just encourage people to like go fast. I think, well, like, what do you think about Brightfield Glider? Because we kind of had like the height of 1-drops in like the like Vow Crimson Hunt era, and I feel like 1-drops might be back.
I think that I am into the Brightfield Glider as a function of how many vehicles with Crew 1 I have in my deck, how many
Sure.
mounts with the Saddle 1 I have in my deck, and how many pilots I have in my deck. If I have a good mixture of all those, I think it's a brilliant creature because pilots can saddle it. It can crew the vehicles. So at any stage of the game, it's going to be doing something relevant while it chips in for those 2 damage early in the game. And the fact that it becomes a 2/3 flyer is also cool. And I think that also, I don't think it's going to be good in many of the archetypes, but I do like Alacrian Armory in this particular deck because it will have a bit more saddle or mounts, I think. And it's better when you have mounts than when you have vehicles, because they are always creatures and they get this +1/+0/+1 bonus at all times, while the mount of your choice or a vehicle of your choice will be auto-crewed, auto-saddled every turn. So I think that it has slightly more utility in this particular deck. So that's why I put this card as a potential payoff. Let's look through your stuff. And again, you put 2 Brightfield Gliders. I have to stress how much I love the fact that it's a possum. Because gliders, unbeknownst to people, are marsupials from Indonesia, and they are in fact possum kind of related. So it's really cool that they didn't put it as a squirrel or something, because it looks like a flying squirrel, but it's an example of convergent evolution, and in fact is a marsupial. So
yeah, I listen, this is my first run as a skeleton builder. I went duplicates on a few things here. Again, just really wanting to like make sure that I hit a critical mass of both early mounts and early vehicles. Being able to have them down early and crew early. I don't know. I definitely wanted to like reduce curve as much as possible, and just kind of like look at like how would I end up in this deck, right? I know it's like, hey, listen, like let's not chalk them full of rares, but it's like you're going to end up in these decks for a reason. So what does that like kind of look like in practice? Yeah, I think we've said enough about Glider. I really want.
I think that these are the 2. I'm pointing to the screen like an idiot when I have a laser in my hand. These are the 2 vehicles that are the perfect accompaniment of the glider. The Scouter 3/2 for 2 that scries 2 when it enters, and it says Crew 1, hello glider, and Air Response Unit also Crew 1, 3/3 flying vigilance. perfect with the glider. This is the kind of mix that I'm talking about, and I see that you have the same kind of idea about it because you put 2 copies of each of those.
Yeah, air response unit is just going to be such a high pick for this deck. Like having something that connects evasively. I think we have a lot of different ways of like making our mounts and vehicles interesting, whether it's adding counters to them, giving them lifelink, things like that. Like I want vehicles and mounts that can connect and connect often, especially like giving this deck a little bit of reach to end games, because I think there are going to be some decks that either like can race or can stabilize, and so I'm looking at how do I close.
Yeah, and I think that there was a similar card at I think it was at common in Kamigawa. There was a 3/2 flyer with crew 1, and if you got density of those, they were really powerful in that format. Even though the vehicle deck was a bit of a mess, but that card, if you had several copies of it, it would become very good. This is an uncommon here, so obviously it's going to be hard to assemble multiple copies. But Glider, at some stage of the game, can make a fair impression of that air response unit in a way, also being evasive, and then after the attack being able to crew something for the blocks. So it's not a complete throwaway because it crew that scouter, for example, or something.
Yeah,
and you
looking
also
at just like the amount of vigilance, vigilance seems to be a very recurring theme from design here. So I want to take them on face that vigilance is important and something that like we need to pay attention to. So, between the armory, between the glider, between air response unit, we keep seeing it come up. Why? How do we take advantage of it? And I don't think it's just crewing. I think that being able to play a little offense defense is important, but you might just need to like chump sometime, because in races, being able to have that one chump and then getting back in, cracking back for lethal, like it's just a lot of games of limited.
One card I might be a bit surprised not to see is the +4/+4 trample trick. Not keen on that one as a one-off.
Where's that?
Oh, you don't have it. That's why I say I'm surprised not to see it.
Oh,
the +4/+4 trample instant speed.
It
trick.
seems like a little overcosted for like. I like Defend the Rider. Just like obviously uncommon, of course. Like great to have it. I want like more. How do I protect my threats? I can definitely.
They are a larger amount evasive, and yeah, with the like Lagorin, you definitely want to protect it. And another creature that is great with Brightfield Glider because it has a subtle 1. So yeah, worth noticing. A bit surprised about the ticket tortoise. Do you have any thoughts about why you put it there?
Just like, hey, listen, it's not going to be perfect.
This is the problem with some people. Like you can make perfect, and you say, "Now you know what? Life is not going to be like that." Who cares?
I like that it comes down immediately and fires up your glider. But yeah, it's just like, hey, listen, I think that I'm nervous about Defender broadly, or like the 04 that like crews your stuff. Like I don't want to be so vehicle heavy that if I don't have a vehicle plan that works, I'm kind of just stranded. Like I don't have threats outside of there. So yeah, I don't know.
You have a fair amount of cars that can deal with that problem because like the Rambler just makes a thing that crews itself.
Sure.
Armory will always be there and activate, and a bunch of other things that can help. Like things that are not worth wasting removal on, that are staying on board and ready to crew. The fact that so many of the things that you have there require only crew 1, which is decent. So.
Totally. This is just really exploring that tension between creature count, vehicle count, interaction. Like it's a tightrope to walk. So, you're like your Rambler has to make a creature. Your Defend the Rider ostensibly might have to make a creature. Like those are the little kind of give and takes that you have.
I think that my brain is already racing to the analysis in 4 weeks
or
something when I will be linking what was the crew cost and how does it impact the counts of your vehicles, the total crew cost. Should I add them up? Should I make the average number of creatures that can crew each things? Weighted average maybe. Okay. Anyway, that is my problem of me in 4 weeks. White black. Max speed attrition. I This is the name I hate. Like, what do you mean even by that?
I'm gonna grab some water really quick. I'm sorry, I'm totally out. And
Totally, go. And I will do it when you're blabbing next time. So here we have an archetype that technically says we want to do things that will limit the resources. What I think about it from looking at the cards is that it's this sort of one of those undercooked archetypes that Mark Rosewater some time ago said that they are realistically working maybe on 6 to 7 color pairs for each set, and 3 of them will be less supported and more. The theme is going to be lower, so you're going to be basically putting good cards from those colors. And sometimes they are good because the cards and the colors are good, but you don't expect too much synergy. As signpost, we have the Dune Drifter, which is black, white X for a 3/3 vehicle with crew 2. And when it enters, you can return an artifact or a creature card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it scales with the game. It can bring something back that you traded back. It can do some things, but for 8 mana, you can even get a Catrodon. Thank you, Siver. That's a very astute observation. And the creature part of the signpost uncommon cycle is the Embalmed Ascendant. That's one white black for a zombie. It's a 1/2. It has start your engines, and when it enters, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. Now, this is a really good rate from that. It's like whatever happens, this is going to be a good signpost uncommon. Dune Drifter is going to be more situational, I guess, because if you play it for 2 mana as a 3/3 that needs crew 2, that's not cutting it for me. It needs to bring something back, so it needs to be like a 6 mana thing that returns a 4-drop or whatever. Then I have some enablers, and by enablers I mean cards that will sort of force your opponent to be behind on exchanges. Gustle Raider is a 3 mana 2/1. Start your engines. When it enters, target opponent reveals their hand, and you choose an instant or sorcery. They'd have to discard it. So hopefully it enters, and at some amount of time you will hit the removal. If they don't have removal that you can discard, at least you're happy to see that they don't have removal, and you can plan your game from that, which is also not nothing. But a good chunk of the time you're going to hit something.
Also, no rules text on it, so start your engines can mean anything.
Yeah, it can mean anything. It means that your engine rats are in your starting hand now from now on for the rest of the tournament. Deathless Pilot, 2 mana 2/2. It can mount and crew with +2 power, so it's a 4/2 for this for the purpose of crewing. And it has 4 mana. Return it to your hand from the graveyard, which is not that expensive. And you trade that for their 2-drop, and later can rebuy it when you have time for doing that kind of thing. And if you're playing attrition and limit the resources, hopefully you're gonna get to the stage where you can use them in this way. Leonin Surveyor, I give it as an example of the type of the card. 2 mana, start your engine. First strike on your turns. And it has a max speed ability from the graveyard. When it is in your graveyard, you can pay 3 and exile it from your graveyard and draw a card. So another card that helps you to get to speed, because it has first strike, it will have probably some clear attacks early in the game. And when it finally dies, you can pay 3 mana and get a card out of it, which again puts you in front of on the resources. And as payoffs, I put some cards that are active when you have max speed. Risen Necrogen, we already discussed in my black-red thing. But also I want to mention the Lightwheel enhancements. That's a 1 mana aura. It gives something +1/+1 and vigilance. Also, it has start your engine. And max speed, you can cast it from your graveyard. So once you get to max speed, you always can give one of your creatures +1/+1. So you have this stupid Deathless Pilot. You can recur it, recast it, put the aura on it, and you have a 3/3 vigilance. They have to deal with it. They deal with it, well, we go again. You get something better than the Deathless Pilot, you put it on something else. And it gets vigilance, so you can always trade it and recoup the Lightwheel enhancements, put it on something else, which I think will be neat, given the fact that you get to the maximum speed, which I don't think will be super easy for that deck. That's my only issue I have with it. And I think that Unswerving Sloth is a neat card for this particular archetype. That's a 5-mana 5/5. When it attacks, when it's saddled, it gains indestructible until end of turn. Untap all creatures you control. And I'm seeing it in the same way as Risen Necrogent. If you're playing Attrition, you hopefully limited the resources of the opponent to the point where you can drop that 5/5, which is super hard to deal with. Neat thing about it is that it has Saddle 4, which is a lot, but it is exactly what Deathless Pilot can provide. And you swing with the 5/5 every turn. It is indestructible. They either take the 5 or you put an Abyss on them and they have to sacrifice a creature every turn, basically, because what survives it? I mean, apart from the Octopus, I guess. So that's the vision of the archetype I have, and because Zach built it, so we're not going to discuss Zach's archetype just out of principle because he left.
All right. Well, hey, blue red discard aggro. This was one of mine.
And I have a different vision of it than you, but okay, let's go with it.
I broadly think that this is just going to be the way I would usually want to build it is more of like a tempo aggro strategy. I think that we still are in this like, is it trouble zone where design is trying to figure out what's your thing? Is it what do you do? And so here we get the quote unquote discard, which is kind of woefully underserved. And I think that the payoffs, like, I don't like Artillerist, which gives you a ping every time that you discard or cycle a card. No, whenever you discard. It is discard specific.
Whenever you discard a card, when this creature deals that much damage to each opponent. So if you discard 2, you ping for 2. If you discard 1, you ping for 1.
Yeah.
And it's cycling, and when you cycle, it also pings for 1.
Exactly. So it's, like, I want to cycle this card. That's not that excited about it. But Marauding Mako and Scrounging Skyray are real payoffs, and they're cards that come down early, which is exactly what you would want. My thinking with the build that I have is that sometimes you're just going to be in the discard lane because nobody else wants it, and that you won't necessarily be fighting over a lot of the same things. So, I think that you could start off in a draft where you're like, hey, not a lot of appealing cards in this pack. I'm just going to take Lightning Strike. And you're kind of like taking red cards, and then you get a Mako like pick 4 or pick 5. Then all of a sudden, hey, maybe I give it a whirl. I think back at like Ikoria cycling is the high watermark for what a cycling deck can be, with Mako kind of playing the Flourishing Fox role that was,
it's not a Flourishing Fox. Let's be honest about it. It's not even close. The density of the stuff is not there.
It's not. It's absolutely not. But
if you can get it to a 3/3 and you can support it with bounce and stun counters and put things on top of opponent's library, I would do the job.
Yeah, it's not ideal.
I think the tempo tools in this format are just amazing. Like, think about it, attacking with the Mako on turn 2, and then they block it, and you just cycle the Howler's Heavy. Mako is a 2/2, it eats their creature, you draw a card, and move on to the next turn. They play a 3-drop, you bounce off, whatever, and you cycle some crap that you don't need. It's a 3/3 now attacking. And it's out of the Grim, whatever, Bobble's range at the same time.
You get out of Bobble range, you're feeling great.
Broadside Barrage, you kill the next 4-drop, and then Mako is a 4/4. And this is just the way I see it. I mean, there's so much of the tempo play that can, at the same time, discard cards.
Yeah, it's I'm big on Howler's Heavy, but it's one of those things where usually in a like limited set, I would want it on a body. We don't get it on a body, but it does replace itself this time.
You can, late in the game, you just put the body on. It's a chunky 3/4 seal. It's the first seal in Magic that is not an enchantment.
All right, well played. Listen, this isn't something that I want to go in aiming for, but I do think it'll be one of those decks that you just kind of backdoor in because it's what's there.
I still think that, like being on the play and casting a Tyrux and then backing it up with a bunch of bounce spells is going to be enough to win games sometimes, because 4-1 is a lot on turn 2.
Yeah, we very, very rarely get 4-1s, right? 3-1 is kind of the high watermark. I just worry how bad 1 toughness is in this set. And I think the answer is going to be very bad. But a lot of aggressive decks I'm happy to play. I would have been happy to play a 3-1. And what were the stats on pilot generation? There's not like a ton of pilots.
No, there's not a lot of that. And also like there is also stats on a bunch of people playing too many vehicles, and then they play the first 2 plays of the game are going to be vehicles, and you just like swing with the Tyrux and just obliterate their life total before they even cast a blocker. So there's that part of the range. So coming back to your version, you have 2 Makos, which makes sense because you want to indicate that this is an important card, and also the Sky Ray, one of those, the slower Mako, basically.
But evasive.
You have 2 Guidelight Optimizers. Add blue, spend this to activate ability, which cycling counts as, by the way, dear chat. Despite being in your hand, it is an ability that you use, so you can use that mana to cycle things. Or to cast artifacts, which you have some amount of.
I really just I need to cycle. I want to cycle fast. It helps me cycle.
It helps you also casting turn 3 Ironclad, the 6/3 menace thingy. So that's pretty decent.
I'm also just fine to like cycle those if I need to. Like I'm trying to power cycle and really go all in on Makos. If I can get, like you see Spell Pierce in here, that's for a reason. Like we don't have a traditional dive down, kind of hexproof effect or spell in blue. So Spell Pierce kind of like has to play that role. And I think that you'll be able to basically get your Spell Pierces for free. So I hate going all in on them if I don't have great ways to protect them. But yeah, I don't know. Like I'd be curious to see how you would build this. I
would focus more on like 1-2 drops. Definitely would go on the Makos and the Sky Rays, and then try to support them with the peppered in synergies. But I would focus much more on bounce off on the roadside puncture, was it? Which, by the way, I had on the way to record this today, and right now my car is standing there with a flat tire next to the house because I didn't even notice I had a puncture, which is fun. On theme, very much on theme. I live for
flat
magic.
Tire. Oh, I thought you got an apartment.
No, flat tire. I got a flat. Yeah, a flat tire. Yeah.
You said you got a flat. Okay, let's not pretend like that couldn't possibly have a second meaning.
Yeah, it could, but not in this economy. Not on the academic salary. Come on, who do you think? Now I get what you meant, and I was like, this person is annoying me. I had a flat tire and he's mocking me. Okay, now I get it. Okay, we got to a certain agreement. By the way, Monument of Endurance is going to be a very neat kind of reward for being in the right lane when you get the deck and it gets passed to you somewhere late, which is fun.
It's one of the. I look at a lot of the cards that are in this deck as cards that only this deck wants, and that's not necessarily a bad place to be in draft.
No, I also see a couple of cards here and there that are designed for other archetypes, but will fit for this one. There's a couple of things that have exhaust that lets you discard cards. Cool. I'll take that if it sort of appears in the draft somewhere. I think that there's one like that. Put counters and discard up to 2 cards and then draw up to 2 cards, which would be neat with a Mako.
Yeah, I want to look at this as like a deck where I can theoretically start in a better archetype or I can start one place and see, wow, I am going to get hooked up with this very specific discard stuff. I'm the only one that wants it, and that's a clear pivot in. But I think that this is not going to be a bad archetype. I think that this is going to be
Maybe not in the first weeks, but let's talk week 3, week 4. It's going to be like one of those sneakily good archetypes that invested players win a lot with. That's my guess. And it's not necessarily going to be all in cycling synergy. It's going to be more tempo, because tempo tools are amazing. Like the stall out, the 2 mana, put 3 stun counters. That's a removal basically in the speed of the game that you try to propose. Bounce off, 1 mana to negate their 4 mana investment. Perfect. Return something to their hand and draw a card. Amazing. 4 mana put on top of library. Great. Howler's heavy. It does what you want while providing tempo value. Excellent. Does not work on the octopus. But apart from that, it's pretty good.
I think what we're going to see is that there will be this very obvious curve that happens a lot with limited sets where there will be too many people trying to do this initially and building it incorrectly. And I don't think that this specific archetype can support that many players at the table. No. So probably overdrafted to begin with. It will be massively underdrafted for a while, and these decks will really come together. But I would be initially trying to do much more of a tempo plan than trying to go all in on like cycling.
And I think, that's why I said I'm seeing it in week 4 or something when situation calms down, because I think the first week people are just going to Mako. Oh, that's amazing. It's like Flourishing Fox. No, it's not. Flourishing Fox was in a set with like 27 million cycling 1 cards that no one wanted, and you could get last pick, and you played 12 lands in those decks. And there is no way in hell you're going to play 12 land decks in Aetherdrift.
I did go 16 here, but I'm like, optimizers are essentially making one of my creature, or one of my cycles 1 each turn. I think Sky Crash is probably going to be more contested than being able to realistically be like, I got a couple of them, no big deal. But
no. I mean, I think it's reasonable to 3 cycling 1 cards to replace a land. So here you could probably even go down to 15, but I would err on having more lands than fewer, because you want to be able to cast your spells in this particular deck.
Yeah, and I'll find other ways to discard excess lands too, which is nice. But yeah,
neat that you have this common land that has cycling 3. That's okay. Red-white, Polska.
We all know what this is.
It's my national colors. Please don't make fun of them. White and red forever. That's why Boros is so.
How many countries' national colors are white and red, though? Like that's not like a flag.
How many countries have a flag that is literally a white stripe and a red stripe? Just the one.
Fair enough.
No fancy leaves of some kind of unidentified tree species, or just a plethora of. It's funny because Greenland and Canada have a white-red flag, so that's interesting. Nothing to do with geopolitical situation. Red-white is traditionally a deck that attacks, and there is no difference in here. The signpost, there is a vehicle, which is a 4 mana, 2 red-white, 2/3 vehicle with flying, and when it enters, you distribute 2+1 counters among 2 other target vehicles and creatures you control. It has crew 1, which is decent. Just what it does tells you that you want to have already 2 creatures on board on turn 4 when you cast it, which is sort of like leaning into a very sophisticated plan of I cast a creature on turn 1, 2, and 3, and then 4. And then hopefully I have a removal to top it up so that I can deal the lethal. Cloudspire Coordinator is slightly different in a way that, yes, it's a 2 mana creature, red and white for a 3/1. You scry 2 when it enters, which is very good because that's how those decks lose. They don't follow up the 2-drop with something impactful, and this lets you find the right things, and or maybe the missing land or whatever. And it has a tap, create X 1/1 colorless pilot creature tokens, where X is the number of mounts and or vehicles that enter the battlefield under your control this turn. The tokens have this token, saddles, whatever, with +2. So it's a neat way of, once it cannot attack because it only has 1 toughness, you start casting your vehicles, and for each vehicle you cast, you make a bunch of pilots that can crew it, and because of that, you don't run into a trouble of not having things to crew them with, which is neat. And, if you make 1 counter, you have a 3/1 for 2 that made a 1/1. That's more than enough for a card. If you make 2, then you're so ahead. And keep in mind that you also already scryed 2 for that price. So quite sweet. The part of the scry that is important is that even if you cast it and they kill it instantly, you got the scry they didn't. So you're ahead on that exchange. The enablers here, I put as enablers the cards that let you get more out of the vehicles. I don't know. Some of you might think that these are the payoffs, but I treat them as enablers, and maybe that's just a semantics issue. But I thought that really you need to make sure that your deck enables you to play a certain amount of vehicles, rather than having things that benefit from vehicles as being the payoffs. So sort of reversing it. And Canyon Volter is the first thing I mentioned. It's a 3/1 for 2. When it saddles or mounts something, that thing gets flying on top of everything, which is neat. All your big things can all of a sudden go into the sky. It's a 2-mana 3/1, which is perfectly reasonable on its own right.
Yeah.
Dynamite Driver is a 1-drop, 1/1. Apart from the pinging, it's also a pilot, so it also can crew things that are bigger than the 1/1 size would suggest, which is I really like that Dynamite Driver. It does a lot of things, and I like all of those things. Cloudspire Captain is a 3-mana 2/3. Mounts and vehicles you control get +1/+1. So a neat lord for your mounts and vehicles. And also it saddles bigger things than the size would suggest, because it can crew things that are 4, for example. As the payoffs, I have a couple of the vehicles and mounts that would be hard to motivate playing in other situation. Number one thing for me is the Spire mech cycle. And if it is as good as I think, it can be one of the better uncommons in the set, because it's a 5-mana 5/4 with haste, a vehicle, but it has an exhaust ability. Tap another untapped mount or vehicle you control. This vehicle becomes an artifact creature. Which means it becomes an artifact creature forever. And you put +1/+1 counter on it for each mount and vehicle you control other than this vehicle. So you say you have 2 vehicles on board, you cast Spire Mech Cycle, you tap one of your vehicles, this becomes a 7/6 haste. It's a lot of body to deal with.
For 5.
For 5. Yeah.
It will just steal games. It will be the grown test card for I was so far ahead.
Crew 2. Okay, screw it. You don't have any vehicles or mounts. It's just a 5/4 haste. It's still fine. It's still big for 5 mana. And with the upside, I think that can be pretty good. The other one that I have in the top end is Dracosaur Auxiliary. That's a mount. It's a 4/4 haste flying dragon dinosaur mount. And whenever this attacks while saddled, it deals 2 damage to any target. And saddle is 3. So you can tap a pilot, saddle it, and it attacks and pings any target, first of all, so it can go face. Or it can kill something that the opponent owns. So pretty big chunk of upside, because it can swing out for 6 out of nowhere if the situation is right. And Clamorous Ironclad is another thing that I think can push a lot of damage, because that's the 6/3 menace vehicle for 4 mana, and it has cycling for a red, which is neat. And this is basically this is also how I built my deck, which I didn't copy as a picture of, but you can imagine all those cards plus a collection of other mounts. And we have the last archetype, green blue.
Hey,
and I've been told.
Can I get one thought on kind of your Boros build, which is that I think that red is going to be specifically red vehicles and mounts are going to be very Boros specific, but they all seem fairly overstated. I don't know how excited I am for Cloudspire Captain just for that reason, that they already kind of punch above their weight class. Everything I'm seeing here. So,
but did you know that the Cloudspire Captain makes the gliders 2/2?
All right, I like it.
You see,
your deck composition matters a lot. Is what I'm saying. That if you're just your top end is your mech cycles, your auxiliaries, and they don't have big saddle costs themselves. Like if I don't know, it was something I would consider.
I mean, I was running a lecture today about stakeholder management, and one thing I told my students is that the important thing to understand is that even if someone is against your project, you can always find an angle which will make them like it. And this was a good example of using that thing in practice. Doesn't like the Cloudspire Captain, does like the glider. Should I remind him that the glider is a mount and gets bigger with Cloudspire Captain?
Oh no, I've been managed.
Which, by the way, can instantly crew it when you cast it on turn 3. So,
Very nice.
Okay. Last one that we have is the green-blue exhaust ramp. And I added red to it, but I don't think it's necessary. You can do the 5-color if you want to feel spicy with the Marshall's Path Cruiser, which I'm pretty sure that they named just to make fun of Marshall and his splashy deck. I mean, I do like the Sky Serpent Seeker as the signpost uncommon. That's a green and a blue for a 1/1 flying death touch, and exhaust for 4 colorless mana, and you can reveal the cards from top of your library until you reveal 2 land cards and put them into the battlefield tapped, and the rest at the bottom, and you put a counter on the 1/1, so it becomes the 2/2. I think that's a solid rate for the creature, but because it costs 4 colorless to activate, I would like to combine it with the Boom Scholar that makes the exhaust abilities 2 cheaper, and then I'm really happy with it. Like, that's the kind of a curve I want. Turn 3 Boom Scholar, turn 4 I play this Seeker and activate the exhaust instantly and ramp myself into a lot. And guess what? Once I ramp into a lot, what can I play? What can I do with 6 mana in this thing? What will allow me to stabilize after I dirtled to ramp? Well, there is the carrot gone. But there's other things to gain value. I mean, as I said, Elvish Refueler is one. Stampeding Scaryfoot, making those 3/3s from a 1/1 is pretty neat. Getting the Topters every time I exhaust is also neat with this Rangers, Aether, or whatever thing. I very smartly put the red stamps on top of the names of the cards, and I don't remember them by heart. I'm sorry, chat. I don't remember all the cards by heart the 2 weeks before the set's release yet. Shame on me, I guess. Oh, actually, it's 3 days before the set's release, but whatever. The fact that this thing has a crew 1 and vigilance, I really think that makes it a very playable card, because it can do some damage, and you can block it and with it and attack with it, because you will make some of those Topters that will be able to crew it, which is neat, I think, about that particular signpost.
Yeah, 3/5's a notable body. Even if you just go,
it ain't an 08, I guess, but
hey, listen, we can't all be awful, but being able to go, Scurryfoot on 1, and then having your Scurryfoot basically available to crew and get you to some of the later game. I think that card is going to be cracked. I wish I had rated it higher in my uncommons.
Which one? Oh, the Aether.
The Ranger.
Yeah, I think that the secret that they had in the recent years in making Simic playable even was to get good signposts. And I think that these look promising, at least. They don't look like a throwaway, but also we've been burned before by them making things looks appealing and then them not being appealing. At least these ones are not like a 1/3 mana dorks. So I'm more optimistic than normally about those. And one card I would like
Either Hive.
One card I would like to highlight: Pit Automaton. 2 mana for an 0/4 defender, and it taps for 2 mana. I can only spend it to activate abilities. Another way of getting this. Go back. Another way of getting the Sky Serpent Seeker on turn 3 and using the you can't use it instantly. But another way of getting those exhaust abilities slightly cheaper and better. So Jason, in the characteristic understatement style of theirs, called it the Soul Ring.
The Soul Ring with the butt.
And I like the fact that it has the butt. And I like the fact that late in the game, when I don't care about ramping anymore because I have so much mana that I just cast double Keratodon a turn. I like the fact that I can double the exhaust ability. I can wait with activating my Scurryfoot and get 2 elephants instead of 1. And 2 elephants, almost a 6/6 reach. So, pretty good.
Yeah. I don't think people should underestimate just how mana hungry these techs are. Like it's just so hard to run out of things to spend on.
Yeah. And here I actually put the octopus in my deck, by the way. Because this is the only conceivable archetype where I think it might be playable. Because you actually don't mind putting that roadblock that lets you survive till the late game. That's fine. I'll put it on. All those 3/1s will just attack into it. I don't care. If they want to spend 4 mana to finish it off, fine. I'll live with that because I have better things to do by that time, hopefully. And I put it a bit for the memes as well. But I do like this Scurryfoot. I think that this is one of the most impressive 1-drops in the set, given the nature of the decks it wants to be in. I think that Omnivores are also good in that because they can deal with a variety of threats of different sizes. Potentially also in this type of deck, you might want to have the card that finds the vanilla creatures. You can find your octopus as well. But you could also find your Omnivores, and if you have the green one, you could potentially also find the 9/7 or something. And then on top of that, you got the classics, the Guardian that can get bigger and give trample to creatures. You have Hazard of the Dunes, the 4/4 that can turn into a 7/7 trample reach. This is your game ender, but I think 4 mana 4/4 trample reach is good enough. If it was a 4/4 trample, I would not care because I'm not an aggressive deck. But it's the reach that I care more initially, and once the reach sort of is not needed anymore because I turned the corner to the extent where I can start swinging with it, I'm happy making it a 7/7, and that finishes the game very quickly, which is the thing I like about it. Obviously, the Ketradon is there. I splashed red for the Boom Scholar and the Dragonautics Engineer, just to show you that, probably you don't want to do it for anything, but it's relatively easy to splash in those decks because you have ways of finding lands. You can have the Velohard Bike that is a mana rock that can fix your colors quite easily. So yeah, that's the thing.
One big thing
card that I thought would be important for this particular deck specifically is the stock up, because you are mana hungry and your cards have 2 lives, basically all of them, because you first cast it and then you exhaust it. But at some moment you might run out of stuff, and this would be a perfect card to have this draw 3, gain 3 life kind of effect that the white blue gets, but it doesn't. So I think stock up is the perfect substitution, where later in the game you ramped enough, you look at the top 5 cards and what are the 2 most impactful things that you can get from that is fine. But at the same time, because it only costs 3 mana, this is the kind of a deck that needs to drop a land every turn. This is not a deck where you're going to think about, I might play 16 lands because there was a thread on Reddit or something. No, you play 17 or even 18 lands. You want to make every single land drop for the totality of the game plus some ramp, and you're still going to spend all your mana every turn. And stock up on turn 3 is essential for you in some games doing that. And this very much reminds me of the kicker deck from Zendikar Rising, when one of the reasons why people were losing games was that they were skeptical about casting the Divination on turn 3 when they were waiting to cast it for 5 mana as the draw 3 and kicker synergies. And because of that, they missed lands in order to get to 5 mana and then died promptly. So yeah, don't make that mistakes in this. These decks, not only mana hungry, but also card hungry and land hungry. You need to satisfy all of it. And I think one of the nice things is this Ranger's Refuter, the 2 mana 3/3 vehicle that has, whenever you activate Exhaust, you draw a card. That's going to be your sort of never crew, keep it alive kind of thing that will allow you to draw cards. And I think that this is more like a classic enchantment rather than a classic artifact than a vehicle. You want to put it as little into harm's way as physically possible. ironically, is one of those cards where you don't want to activate Exhaust, because then you permanently turn it into a creature, and it has a target on its back since that moment.
And like repeatable exhaust that gets you there. I guess like what I worry about with this is just like a nodal absence of like hard removal, and so like somebody sticks like the snare, whatever, that like
what are they going to stick? Something that has double flying and flies over my Caradons? Nothing does it. That's my removal. 6/6, gain 4 life, reach.
I think
Done.
there's some like interesting things with activated abilities, things that I don't want to just let my opponent sit with. But you know, like, hey, there's a little interaction. We got flood the engine, the blowout.
Broadside blowout, yeah, flood the engine. Yeah, plenty of interaction. Like 2. Both. I have both interactions. I just didn't want to play the bite down in here, honestly. I just like, because so much of my early game is tiny creatures. And then my bite spell becomes good when I have the Caradon on board, which already covers all the bases, basically.
I hear you. I look at it and I go, I know if I exhaust one of my creatures and they don't interact with it, then my bite spell is pretty free. I'm not necessarily worried about it. Just something to keep in mind is like you time these things is if you get away with like an exhaustibility, then you kind of know where your opponent sits on interaction.
I think Sever has I would like to generally recognize Sever's solo attempts to make puns in the chat. I did enjoy all of them. But here they actually make a good point of this is a good place to splash the Is It signpost for interaction. 5 damage and looting. That's what you want. This is the way maybe where you can make a Timur and 18 lands, which satisfies a couple of things. I would also think maybe this deck, better interaction for you to have rather than removal is to have this green hexproof spell where you want to be protecting your stuff when it's exposed while you activate the exhaust abilities or something. So I think that will be playable. I don't think it will be also easy to play early in the format. That's my risk. Okay. I will put the slides for everyone on my Patreon, but I will make them not paywalled or anything, so anyone can enjoy our jolly creations. I asked the team to put the top 3 commons, top 3 uncommons, and the best bomb of the format according to their opinions. And as you can see, they delivered.
Dun, 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 dun. Wow.
Trezio, as always, unfortunately, they had to go with their kid to do some American sport game, so they're not there. But they definitely deliver, and they put some of the cards. I'm hoping that this thing gets populated before the set release. I give you another deadline because I want to make it a traditional thing to put your guesses for the best common, best uncommon, and we can do maybe a bit of a graphing at the beginning of the next Skeleton Crew of who did the best in predicting the best cards for the set.
I'm looking at the live version right now, and Jason
put Honey Mammoth as the only answer to every common.
No, there are real answers in there now. There are real answers. And it agreed with me on the bomb, which I like. Yay! I did something right.
Which bomb did you put? Which bomb did you put?
Sepsonen. The 6/6 reach indestructible bounty of Luxor on a body.
Yeah. That sounds good. Yeah, that's also like a decent thing that Simic gets, like loot being easily splashable, and then the god that is busted. So that's also like an advantage of Simic. You will sometimes get there like you did with Bonnie Pal in
yes.
Like, you knew that if someone played the forest in an island in OTJ against you, that the Bonnie Pal is coming and there's nothing you can do about it. Okay, I think that we covered it relatively broadly. This is more to give you the food for thought than to give you answers, because we clearly don't have any answers. We are having a lot of questions and we have some hypotheses. These are very untested, and because of that, treat them, with certain dose of skepticism. healthy dose of skepticism. And I hope that at least some of this, and especially the removal statistics, because kids love those, are going to be useful for you in your per-release struggles. And let me know if they helped. At Blue Sky, because I'm not on at X. Also, I stopped calling Twitter Twitter because it's not Twitter anymore. It's just X now, and it sucks.
It has big X energy. I was like, I'll never call it X. It'll always be Twitter to me. And now I'm like, no, it's X.
Yeah, it's X. It's just X. It's just X. It's my X social media, and therefore. Well, I really found it always cute that Elon Musk called his social network after his wife. No, too soon. All right. On that bombshell, I guess that thank you very much, Jake. Do you have anything to plug?
Yeah, check out my Substack. It's called Mana Club. Twice a week, I write basically a Magic magazine about everything that's happening in the news, from limited to finance to Commander, art sometimes, and then news usually comes out on Wednesday and Saturday. Try and take a deep dive into a couple different topics. And sometimes I just do really long form stuff. Usually it's about 2,000 to 4,000 words. I did 8,000 words called 100 Thoughts on Limited Magic, which covers everything from draft to sealed to gameplay, literally everything that I've ever thought about limited. I kind of kept a running document and put it on my Substack. I have removed it from the paywall for your listeners for let's say a week. It's a ton of words about the thing that I am the most passionate about. I will also be doing the early access event for Arena tomorrow, Wednesday, February 5th, and for MTGO on the 6th. You can watch my stream at twitch.tv/Uncle Cardboard. You can follow me on social media at Jake for Mayor, or I think I'm just jakebrown.com on Blue Sky. That's Brown with an E, Jake with an E. Put E's on the end of things.
Despite how I wrote it for I don't know how many episodes of Magic Numbers, it is Brown with an E at the end, and I just had Brown without E.
It's my Scots-Irish heritage.
As my word of recommendation, Jake may seem like an insane person, but it's not the case. He's just a very unique thinker, and I honestly enjoy all the thoughts that he had about Limited was best 7 minutes I spent.
Brutal. Where can people find you? What do you have going on?
Yeah, they can find me here. I'm in my kitchen most of the time. So yeah, if you're around in Cornwall, just knock on the door. I can give you a coffee. Apart from that, just don't bother finding me. Find my guests, Zach and Jason. They also have really cool stuff going on. I said Jason has the experimental synthesizer website when they write their thoughts. Streams together with CFD Sock when they are brewing new things and constructed that always are mind-blowing. So follow those. Zach, if you are in Minnesota, he is in the comedy circuit there. So make sure to drop into a show that Zach is doing and have some fun with it. And on that bombshell, next week, we're diving into the early data because I think on Tuesday it's released on Arena. So next Saturday, I'm trying to release an episode with the early data analysis. The one that you're waiting on. I can do all the fancy 10-hour analyses and dive deep into the replay data to give you the nitty-gritty. Nah, which card good? That's the one you're waiting for. And trust me, people want it. I'm going to keep on delivering it. So see you next week and a bit before. I can't do it next week literally because there won't be enough data to make any kind of conclusions. So Saturday I'm going to make the episode with the early data. See you then. Bye-bye.
Ta-ta.